the little things. Good afternoon. We'll call this meeting to order. To start out with, our president, Dr. Taylor, is out of town, but she will be joining us via virtual. All right. Call to order. Roll call. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. Vice President, excuse me. President Angela Taylor.
She's here in spirit.
Okay. Vice President Nicolette.
Present.
I am here. Trustee Church.
Here.
Trustee Mayberry.
I'm here.
Trustee Rodriguez.
Here.
Trustee Smith. Here. And our student representative is not here yet. We have a quorum, Madam President.
Thank you. Next, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. If I may, I think I would like Clerk Minetto to please lead us.
Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
I see Angie now, so I know she's here.
Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't get, I'm having a little headset issue, but yes, I'm here. I heard you. Thank you.
All right. As per the agenda, item 104, action to adopt the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order by the board. The board may combine two or more agenda items for consideration. The board may remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. Public comment, JJ?
I do not have any for this item.
Nothing at this time. And I just want to tell everyone that's here and everyone that's listening, please be patient with me. I'm sitting in the president's seat, and those are large shoes to fill, and that doesn't mean her feet are big.
Do you want to mention that you're going to move the COVID?
What?
Do you want to mention you're going to move the COVID item up?
I will. Should I do that now? Move the COVID item up?
Is that in the consent? Is the COVID item in the consent?
No,
No, then yeah, that would be.
later.
No, that'd be right now.
It's not in the consent. It's in the major agenda. All right. Thank you. Thank you for your patience. And at this point, given that we have our professionals from the health department to lead us in a discussion, I am going to move agenda item 3.5 to after 3.1. So it will be this order: 3.1, 3.5, 3.2, 3.3, and 3.4.
And with that change, you're looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you. And with that change, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Guess we got a second there.
We have Trustee Rodriguez with a first and Clerk Minetto with a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, unanimous. Thank you. Okay. So our agenda, moving on to consent agenda. Let me read this. Number 2. All matters listed under the consent agenda are considered routine and may be acted upon by the Board of Trustees with one action and without an extensive hearing. Since approval of the consent agenda item may be approved in one motion, members of the public wishing to speak on a consent agenda item should submit a public comment card prior to any vote. Members of the public may also email public comments. Any member of the board may request an item be taken from the consent agenda, discussed, and acted upon separately during this meeting. The president or vice president retains discretion in deciding whether or not an item will be removed from the consent agenda. Do I have public comment?
Madam President, or acting Madam President?
Acting?
Madam Acting President, how's that?
That's good.
I would like to remove 2.25, the employee complaint process, from the consent agenda. I don't believe I'll need staff. I'll just need to make a comment before I vote.
It's 2.23. 2.23.
Well,
2.25, I believe it is. The last one, employee.
4,700, the policy 4,700, correct?
Yes.
That is item number 2.25. All right, the last one, 2.25. And we do, apparently, we do have staff available. And we do have a comment card. All right. You will listen to the comment card at this time.
John Funk for item 2.09.
Hello, welcome, Mr. Funk.
Thank you.
Esquire Funk.
That's right, I guess. Good afternoon, everybody. John Funk, yes, you recognize me. I was here earlier a couple months ago. Different capacity, though, for today. Today I'm here to talk about consent agenda item 2.09, which concerns board policy 5325. Just a little bit of background on 5325. That came into existence in 2018 following a large community involvement in board meetings, primarily concerned about lacrosse. There was a proposed board policy that was put in place, put before the board. Myself and others came and spoke about that, about the importance of lacrosse, why lacrosse existed, what High Sierra Lacrosse did for the community and how it partnered with and worked with some of the schools within Washoe County School District. We worked closely with Mr. Stallworth behind us to put some policies and procedures in place. I was asked to attend today because we noticed that there were changes being made. The concern from the folks I was speaking with is that we were going backwards. We're removing some of the rights and things that had been accomplished 4 years ago. Dr. Taylor was on the board at that time. I remember she was participating as well. I don't think that's the case in reading your guys' changes, but they asked me to appear, make comment, and see if we can get some sort of confirmation that we're not trying to remove any rights. We're just rewriting the language so it's easier to read, which is what my interpretation of it was. So that's why I'm here today. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you.
All right. So we are going to be removing 2.25. Do I have a motion to approve? Let me get these numbers in order here. 2.02, 2.03, 2.04, 2.05, 2.06, 2.07, 2.08, 2.09, 2.10, 2.10, 2.11, 2.12, 2.13, 2.14, 2.15, 2.16, 2.17, 2.18, 2.19, 2.20, 2.21, 2.22, 2.23, and 2.24. Do I have a motion to approve? Trustee Rodriguez motion. Second? Clerk Minetto, second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on to consent agenda item 2.25. Trustee Church.
Thank you very much. I don't believe I need staff. If you want to come forward, you can. But basically, this involves a employee complaint process. It has similar verbiage as two other policies, all of which make employee complaints as confidential as legally possible. That's the opposite of what I want. I want transparency as much as legally possible. And then should an employee contract or the law require confidentiality, of course, I would respect that. But I believe the public has a need and a right to know about the conduct of their employees at the school district. I believe that should be open and transparent. Generally, from my experience, at a bare minimum, there would be some kind of a hybrid system. I don't necessarily believe that they should get the full name of everybody as well as all the specific details, but I would support a hybrid system where you get a report maybe quarterly that says the following complaints were received. This is the results. Those results, generally, from my experience, would include such findings as founded, meaning sustained, unfounded, meaning it's not true, not sustained, which basically means you can't prove it one way or the other, as well as other or resolved. In other words, if the parties work it out beforehand and it's withdrawn, if an employee resigns, then they could no longer be subject to the disciplinary investigation. So I'm going to vote no on this, and I appreciate your time. And just for the record, if anybody's wondering about my apparel, other than being cold in here at times, I'm wearing my blue and yellow armband in support of the Ukrainian people.
Thank you, Trustee Church. I see Trustee Smith's light on.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. So you have my curiosity with the transparency. I mean, I think transparency is a very good thing. And in general, I support transparency. But if memory serves, we have legal reasons for having a policy like this. Can you fill in those blanks? I support transparency. I also support us not being sued or being acting against Nevada revised statute. So if you could fill in some blanks here, that would be great.
I can certainly speak from the layperson perspective. When I think about, particularly in the context of employee complaints, from a human resources perspective, I worry about the potential for a chilling effect. If people believe that information will be disclosed, they may be hesitant to bring forward legitimate concerns for fear of retaliation or other ramifications. So I worry about it from that perspective, but my colleague, Councilor Wright, can provide legal perspective.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Emily completely. Confidentiality is integral to any investigation for a number of reasons. I jotted down a few, but certainly encourage employees to come forward, witnesses to come forward, not afraid. The other part of that is the anti or non-retaliation policy that we enforce with our employees that are taking part of an investigation. It protects the integrity of the investigation, preventing witnesses aligning stories if the investigation is wide open. And this is the context of starting an investigation and doing an investigation. If Trustee Church, you're talking about the results of an investigation, the law already provides for that transparency through the Nevada Public Records Act. What we try to do is to contain investigations confidentiality to make sure it is a solid investigation. People aren't defamed somehow by information getting out, and the district faces some type of liability from lawsuits. But even the Supreme Court of Nevada in recent cases, 2020 was the most recent one I pulled, Las Vegas Municipal or Metropolitan Police Department versus Las Vegas Review and Journal. They talked about the privacy rights of public employees, and they have them. They're public employees, but they don't disband all their privacy rights. So the Supreme Court has a balancing test now under the case law that balances people's public employees' rights to privacy with the public's right to know, and it's a pretty good test. I think time will tell if they're going to change it again, but that's my 2 cents.
And really quick, as a follow-up, because Trustee Church did bring up, which is generally a good idea, and I think we do it in some of our other reports, because with the fraud, waste, or abuse report, those do follow a similar model to what Trustee Church is mentioning, but that's a completely different feedback mechanism than what this policy surrounds. Is that correct?
Correct.
Could you repeat that?
So you may recall that on a quarterly basis, we receive the reports around the fraud, waste, or abuse, and I believe Mr. Kirk Starkey's team manages those. And those are also categorized very similarly to what you are suggesting, which is that they are, and careful here because I want everybody gut check me on this, but I read these, I save these, and I understand that the matters that are brought confidentially to the internal audit group, they are then categorized as being founded or partial or unfounded. So we do take a transparent approach with other aspects of the feedback mechanism, but regards to this policy and where needed, we have to follow at least the current Nevada state law. Is that like, was that like an accurate retelling from a non-lawyer for the district?
I'm not going to comment on Mr. Starkey's reports because I'm not familiar with those coming out. But like I stated, we certainly, Office General Counsel, I work quite a bit with Emily in Human Resources, and we understand that transparency is important for the people of the state of Nevada and with our public entities, and we have no problem with that. But there's a balancing test, and this interest of privacy for employees, as well as the integrity of the investigations at that stage when you're conducting the investigation. There needs to be confidentiality to have a good solid outcome that you're not afraid to make decisions on because you have a good investigation. The other part is the balancing that the Supreme Court does when public records are requested. And that's the world we live in, and we are as transparent as the law allows us to be.
I think I respectfully disagree with the last sentence. You mentioned that there's a balancing act set forth in the case law as well as Nevada revised statute, I believe, but this is no balancing act. This is not, we are not being as transparent as possible. There is no balancing act here. This is that employee complaints will be as confidential as possible, not as transparent. So let me ask you a question. If we had a policy that said, if we changed it, just literally changed the wording and said, complaints shall be as transparent as legally possible, consistent with law, employee contract, and case law, would that be a violation? Would we be in violation of the law to have that policy?
I don't know if we'd be in violation of any law, probably in violation of common sense and ability to perform a function. Every investigation, every matter that the district is undertaking, whether it's in HR or legal office, we would have to go through those and self-report all that information without accidentally releasing information that may be confidential. It's backwards. We keep everything as confidential as we can. If there's a law saying that it needs to be reproduced or given to another, then we do that.
And again, I respectfully suggest that we follow that case law that you mentioned that, as you said over and over, is a balancing act. This is no balancing act. And let me give one example, and anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. If a complainant said, I want to be transparent, I want my name out there, I want it known that this, I don't want to pick on a janitor or somebody, but this employee touched me or yelled at me or called me a racial name or whatever it is, I want that to be transparent. And if that employee made that transparent, say to the media, the employee would be disciplined because they violated this policy. You know, we're ignoring the fact that the complainant has certain rights. And again, that's not necessarily saying we're going to say who the accused was, but this just locks us into a corner.
Well, I'll respectfully disagree, because if an employee wants to go out and say, another employee did this to me, that's their business, and they may face lawsuits or other actions if the person they're discussing believes it's somehow defamatory or a violation of their rights. What this is pertaining to is the district doing a complaint process and investigation, not an individual employee spouting off somewhere.
If I may, Trustee Smith?
Thank you. What I was going to say is exactly that. We, of course, can't control what anyone does here in the district outside in their own personal decisions or perhaps based on whatever legal advice they're getting. We're making policy, though, that is in alignment with Nevada state law and protects our district. And, of course, protects the people within the district as well, too. And so I absolutely support transparency, but I very much also support us being in accordance to Nevada state law. And if there were ever any changes from this balancing with the Supreme Court, I'm sure that we would adjust as it relates to that. So I think it's really important that we not open ourselves up to unnecessary litigation or exposing any employees to that. So that's all I have to say, I think, about that.
Thank you, Trustee Rodriguez.
I'm ready to make a motion that the Board of Trustees approves consent agenda
Trustee, I appreciate that. Let's take public comment, if there is any. No public comment. Please continue, Trustee Rodriguez. Thank you.
Yes, I prepare to make a motion that the Board of Trustees accepts consent agenda item 2.25, adoption to Board Policy 4700.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Clerk Minetto, second. All those in favor?
I have discussion.
I'm sorry, terribly sorry. I'm sorry, Trustee Church. Discussion.
Yeah, discussion or one more question. If I heard right, I just want to clarify that I believe I heard counsel say under public document requests, an employee would have the right to know the results of the investigation. Did I hear that right?
No, that's not what I said. What I said, there would have to be that balancing act. Whatever information that would come within that balancing act, if it was a violation of somebody's privacy rights, it would probably be redacted from a report. In a broad sense, I can't say yes or no. We would have to be on a case-by-case basis on what document you're talking about and what it includes.
So just in general, if an employee filed a complaint, what would they be told?
I don't know what they'd be told. I know what I would tell them. This investigation is as confidential as possible. We hope that you keep it confidential. The district has a very strong policy of making sure our employees are not retaliated against. So if you believe that anybody is retaliating against you for making this report, let me know as the investigator. Those are the things I would do. In general, I don't know what others would say.
Well, maybe Ms. Ellison would know, but at the conclusion, so it's all over and done with, would they be told anything?
Again, I'm not going to answer general terms.
It's going to depend on the situation, Trustee Church, as to what's going to be happening at the end of that investigation. It's going to depend, as Chris Wright mentioned, case-by-case basis.
Any more discussion? All right, JJ, would you please read the motion?
That the Board of Trustees provides preliminary approval to the adoption of Board Policy 4700, employee complaint process, and initiation of the 13-day public review and comment period.
Thank you. We have the motion. We have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Thank you, President Taylor. All right.
I voted. Did you hear it?
Motion
I've been
passes 6-1. All right. Thank you for your patience with me. Moving right along. All right. We're going to do 301 first? Yeah, 301 first. Now, so, right, so I'm good? Yeah. All right, next on the agenda, 3.01. Do I do public comment now? Do I do public comment now? No. Okay. That is the presentation and discussion to provide updates regarding the superintendent search for the Washoe County District by the Bryan Group, better known as TBG. And this is for information and discussion only. Welcome. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Pleased to be here. We're going to run through a few bullet points, but obviously open to any questions you may have along the way. We are on time and on track. That hasn't changed. Since we saw you last, we have compiled all of the information from interviews, surveys, focus groups, and created very refined and validated information to create the performance criteria. And with that in hand, the search advisory group has already screened all the applications. And this evening, we will be identifying those moving on to the interview. You want to talk about?
May I ask a question in real time? Where did we land in terms of full and completed applicants?
Well, that is my next bullet point. So glad you asked. We did end up with a total of 20 full applications. So a couple more rolled in after we spoke last. So 20 full applications, all of them met the board's criteria of a master's qualification and a nexus to education. We do have a diversity mix of white, Hispanic, Black, and Native American in the mix. At least one from each of those groups, and about an equal split between men and women. We also have both traditional and non-traditional candidates. So got a good mix there. We did, as mentioned before, 16 partial applications that we tried to follow up with and tried to encourage them to put in the full application, but they remained partial at that point. Yep.
We don't have a lot else. Like I said, we're on track, moving towards the interviews, and our next report will be letting you know that, where we're going. Those who do not make it to the interview, and I think we mentioned last time, because for some of the applicants, their confidentiality was particularly sensitive, that we went the extra step and we redacted all of the applications, every piece of material, so that it was not identifiable. And the search advisory group had the redacted information. So anyone, and they're all coded, so anyone who isn't moved forward is told that, and their name will never be released that they, in fact, applied for the job. So they're protected in terms of concern about their employer finding out or things like that.
Trustee Smith.
I feel like the student that's jumping ahead. So because I follow the timeline all the time. So when we say that we're on time, I know that around the 13th to the 20th, that there were the final, like the long form interviews. Are those still coming to us? This is my first time hiring a superintendent, so I'm excited to be a student of the process.
As soon as we have done the short interviews, the decision is made how many of these go forward to the long interview. And once we've done the long interviews, how many of those are forwarded to you. So you can't tell for sure exactly what that'll be. Best guess is we will end up forwarding to you, and we only forward to you those who we feel as though can do the job. Probably be 3 or 4.
Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
Just to piggyback on Trustee Smith's comments, you mentioned a total number of candidates. Can I ask for a breakdown of traditional versus non-traditional?
Well, it was about 50-50.
Okay.
We have some of each.
Okay. Let me ask you this too. I do have, I've received some feedback of sort of the subjective nature that the SAG, the Search Advisory Group, is working on, and wanted you to tell us more, if you can kind of explain the process of how the SAG is being engaged and sort of, you know, what their objectives are at this stage in the game.
Sure. They were engaged in helping collect data from the community, doing focus groups. They helped significantly in pulling some of that information together and summarizing it for us to look at. They were trained in how to screen applications. They were trained in how to use the criteria. The criteria are very detailed. They're criteria in terms of role proficiencies, competency proficiencies, leadership styles, and what we call derailers or failure factors. And every one of those has a definition and anywhere from 5 to 10 measurable indicators. So when they see this in their storytelling, when we get to the storytelling, the long interview in particular, if we see those in the stories of past practices, past behavior, past events they've been part of, then we can say they've got it. If we don't see it, they don't. It's as simple as that.
Will members of the SAG at any point have any interaction with the candidates, or is it just all sort of what they're seeing on paper, the feedback that you're getting?
Yeah, the only interaction so far has been the application and their evaluation of the applications. And that's a combination. We have an evaluation, and we have some wild cards. If we thought that SAG was really off the rails, we would let them know. But so far, for example, we did a preliminary evaluation of all 20 candidates, and when they did their evaluation, it was very similar in terms of who ended up at the top, middle, and down, but they had a chance to really dig deeply in that. The next step, in which they are very involved, as long as they've signed a non-disclosure agreement, and they had to do that for the applications as well, is that they will be going through this evening short interview training.
Okay.
And that is pretty detailed in terms of we reinforce, we've taught them how to score the application against the criteria. We use the same criteria as part of all the interviews, and there's an actual form for doing that, 2-page form. And they will be taught how to score an interview, and so I will be conducting the interview, and afterwards I will be leading the scoring session and forcing them to look at evidence. It's really hard for people who haven't learned to do this, but with each step of screening, they get better at understanding what it means to be competent against criteria. So by the time we get to the long interviews, they are pretty well schooled. I can tell you that nobody that goes through this is the same coming out the other end in terms of understanding leadership and understanding how to score for it. So.
Thank you. So they will participate in sort of the initial interviews. I mean, they'll have.
Oh yeah. Because the schedule is, it's hard. It takes a 3-hour block even for a short interview. Because people come in, we talk about what have we seen in the applications, what questions might you have from the application that needs to be answered. We take them through 45 minutes of storytelling, usually 2 or 3 short stories, and then we follow up with specific questions that might be asked of every candidate, and then some questions that are specific based on their application, their own application. But we also reinforce for people that what should be weighted, at least given twice the weight, is what they heard in the stories, because that's legitimate. It actually has happened. And only past behavior predicts future behavior, and that's why we do that. So if you ask somebody, how would you handle this question, or why would this happen, and so forth, that has little predictability. They, on the interview itself, they are off-screen because, as I've mentioned before, you don't want to have that dynamic of too many faces in front of people. And they get asked in. For example, after each story, they are invited in for follow-up questions. So they come on screen and are face-to-face with the candidate at that point, and they can do follow-ups. When we do the questions, we usually ask 3 or 4 questions and then say, do you have any questions to follow up to the questions? So that's the next piece. And then there's much more in the long interview. There's 5 sections of the long interview. It's the same thing. They're off screen, they're on screen. They're off screen, they're on screen. But they are intimately involved. And what we do is because of the number of criteria and that we're trying to score for and look at, we will say, well, you 3 or 4 members, you're going to be looking at these particular roles. Everybody scores everything, but you're going to really hone in and listen for evidence for this person's past ability to be an advocate for the district, for example. And we have measures for advocate. And so then we have a discussion, and we carry it forward from that point on.
And one final question, and maybe you're not there yet, quite yet, but what's the timeline where we're at now? And again, maybe that'll be
short interviews done by the end of next week. Okay. And in some cases, we may start the long interviews in parallel, even though we haven't finished. If the SAG has said that short interviewee was really strong and we want them, then we won't wait to do a long interview there. We may start that even though we might not have finished the short interviews.
When do you think we'll get the top 3 or 4 or whatever you nailed that
That would
down
be about 2 weeks. Yeah, two and a half weeks from this weekend. Yeah.
Really, that's soon? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam.
Trustee Taylor. President Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. And hello to the Bryan Group. Good to see the two of you. And to my colleagues. Just a couple of questions. Can you talk a little bit, and I asked about this, Dr. Bryan, before, talk a little bit about the screening process. And, I know we have the SAG group, and you've done some training with them to assist with this and so on. And I hear you talking about how you have certain people targeting certain things. But the piece in the process where I want to make sure I'm not missing a disconnect is every candidate then is not screened by the same people. Can you talk through that piece a little bit?
That was the case only for the applications, but we had at least 2 SAG sub-teams, including students, looking at every candidate. In some cases, a candidate was screened by 3 subgroups. Tonight, if there are any debate on the scorings that came out of that, and our scorings as well, then we might even go back and look at those candidates that are debated. What you usually find is those that are at the top are consensus. Those that are at the bottom that we shouldn't carry forward in consensus, it's the few in the middle that you may need to take a second look at and say, do they move on to the short interview or not? When we start the interviews, that's everybody gets to see those. If they can't make the interview, then it's recorded and they get a chance to look at it and put in their 2 cents. And well, it's more than 2 cents. It's a couple bucks worth of scoring. So.
Okay. So let me say back to you what I think you're saying, and I think I follow. Then that on for the application screening only, there were 2 or 3 groups of SAG members, and each included students that had an opportunity to review the applications and do some scoring or ranking based upon your training. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, I think you said, and then you guys as a team, staff, you guys do that as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Kind of look at those, and then and that more often than not, typically, and I imagine that this search follows suit. There's similarities. There's overwhelming similarity between what we get from the SAGs, what you get from the SAGs, and SAG groups, and then what you and staff have come up with. And then if there's if there are any kind of difference in that, then those are the people you'll talk about it, in your list. I think you're training just tonight and so on. I guess my question, I just want to make sure that it's certainly fair and objective across the board for everyone. That the same criteria, is being used. It's the criteria that we discussed as a board. Those things that's so that everyone is really getting the same look, right? Has the same opportunity. Does that make sense?
Yes, but keep in mind that our criteria at the end of the day is much, much, much more detailed, measurable, and has been validated than what the board discussion had.
Okay, but it's certainly I would go as far as to say it goes perhaps deeper than maybe what the board discussion was, but generally as a whole, the board really owns that criteria in that manner. Does that make sense?
Yes, and you will see that when we forwarded it to you. You will see the scoring. You will see the interview. You can do your own scoring. And it'll make a lot of sense at that point in time.
Okay. All right. I guess again, just wanting to make sure that, because I've never been. This is a new process in terms of doing it this way, and that's part of why we asked you to help us doing things differently. And I've just never seen a process before where it isn't the exact same group every single step of the way. Just because we began it differently, just making sure that for my own well-being, that everyone everyone's got the same subjective. Or I shouldn't say subjective as much, because that's not necessarily what we want, but the same view, the same scoring, and the same criteria. That's the word I'm looking for.
And I think
across the board.
Yeah.
part of the reason that our process is so effective and effectively removes bias is because we are comparing against the same set of criteria every time. And when someone say they like this candidate or they want to advocate for this candidate, we'll be like, all right, show us what the evidence you have is for them expressing this skill. Because maybe they saw something we didn't in one part or something. But it all has to go back to show us how their behavior, their evidence matches up with what we are saying we want.
Yeah.
So you can't just be like, I like the vibe. That's not an answer.
Like the vibe. Okay, again, obviously, we all want a fair and equitable process, and so these questions are just kind of honing in on everyone. We are feeling as though they've had a fair and equitable opportunity to come work with us.
Right. Without a doubt.
Okay.
And those standards start at the beginning. The fact that we are so in sync with the SAG goes to the fact that we have the same criteria across everybody using it, and that we've trained them. So if we're not on the same wavelength, we've done something wrong, and that would be a surprise. So.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Taylor.
Thank you.
Any of my colleagues have any other questions? If not, I have, please, Trustee Church.
Just briefly, I'm very excited. It's incredible, and 20 applicants. That's awesome in this environment. I guess my only comment would be if you have ones that don't meet the criteria, I get it. If you have ones that are strong, I get it. If you're on the edge, personally, I'd rather see that person move forward, so at least we could look at them. If you're kind of like, well, they did pretty well, I prefer that we get to look at them. That's my own personal opinion.
Okay, remember, if you get to look at them, it's taking 5 hours of your time per candidate, or at least 4.
Well, this is a big investment.
Yeah. And I don't know, I guess from our perspective, it doesn't make sense to forward someone who we don't think can do the job that's sitting on the fence. But if we think they've got real possibility, then we would definitely forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Smith, your light was coming on?
If it was briefly. I believe in trusting the process also because anyone that comes to us therefore becomes public as well too. So that's always something that we want to be mindful of, particularly with a candidate that the Bryan Group is not forwarding to us with that same degree of confidence as the other applicants. For the process, for the public, and then also for us, when those long interview recordings do come to us, is that something that would come to us directly from you, or would that be through Ms. Ellison?
That will be from us individually to each of you. And there'll be a lot of support materials. There'll be information about each candidate in summary form. There will be me being a talking head for probably 10 minutes or so, explaining what you have in hand, how you might want to look at the criteria, issues around fit. How do you determine fit if you've got 2 people who are strong? Yeah. We obviously check in with Emily all along the way in terms of process, but.
Speaking of Emily Ellison, our in-house expert, she's standing there ready to share.
Yeah, I think Emily Ellison, Chief Human Resources Officer for the record, I think the thing that I'd just like to add to that is while the information will be coming directly from the Bryan Group to you all, when the information is made available to you, it will also be made available to the public per our public posting process. So that will happen. I take care of that part, but Bill and his team will send the information directly to you.
Yeah.
And to that point, do we have any idea when the website can be updated? Because thank you for that. It's very important that the public stays abreast of this. They're very interested, as they should be.
Absolutely. We'll work with Nora to make sure that it reflects current information.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And for me personally, as soon as possible would be wonderful. I know you have to be, respectful and professional. The more you can give our public, the better.
Mm-hmm.
President Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Dr. Bryan, Nora, I'll ask the two of you, do you anticipate, you spoke, Dr. Bryan, of when the finals screening is done and that you're ready, prepared to bring the finalists forward to the board, and then you talked just a minute ago about that process, and you'll kind of talk us through it and so on. And so do you require, because that's obviously all public as it should be, do you anticipate that requiring the kind of time where we might maybe should we be identifying a time to have a special meeting of the board, or is it something done during the meeting? What's your direction you're
we would
on
definitely want a special meeting to once you've had a chance. We have found the best thing to do is to send stuff to you as individuals first, so that you can look at them, study it, come up with, because we're talking about hours of information here, so that when you get together to make a decision on who goes forward, everybody's done their homework.
Mm-hmm.
We have Chief Human Resources Officer Emily Ellison behind you waiting.
Sorry to keep sneaking in on your presentation. I just completely lost my train of thought. That is embarrassing.
Dr. Bryan, can you repeat everything you just said?
What we normally try to do, unless it's breaking some rule or whatever the case may be, is that we prefer to send to each person individually the links to all of the interviews, the application materials, my talking head piece, and sort of suggested ways of how to use this material, such that when you then come together, you've done your homework, because otherwise your judgment won't be as good. It's as simple as that.
I just remembered. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Emily Ellison, Chief Human Resources Officer for the record. President Taylor, specific to your question, Dr. Bryan and his team and I have been working together to plan for the March 29th meeting. And what we anticipate bringing to you on the March 29th agenda is an action item around some of the remaining decisions to be made. So what will the meet and greet opportunities look like, for example? When will those happen? When should we schedule special board meetings? The logistics of the remainder of the process we intend to bring on March 29th.
President Taylor.
Okay, thank you. No, thank you. I was going to ask a few more details, but Ms. Ellison, I'm so grateful that you remembered, because that kind of took that off the table. So we'll anticipate moving forward. Just thinking about scheduling to allow those of us with quote unquote regular jobs to plan accordingly with as much lead time as possible. So that will be helpful. So thank you. We'll look forward to that on the 29th.
Thank you. And to that, I'm hoping that in the next week we can start receiving some information. I'm not worried about 5 hours of reading and reviewing. That's part of the job. But if we can receive information, parse it out, that would be very helpful. Is that going to be a possibility?
Not in the next week.
Okay.
Because we have to determine who goes to the long interview, and then we need to start the long interviews.
Thank you. Emily.
Emily Ellison, Chief Human Resources Officer. The other thing that I would add is think about the candidates as a board item. And so they will come to you and be posted in the same way that any other board item is agendized. So there's not an opportunity for us to, or the Bryan Group, to send you one candidate at a time so that you have, over a period of time to review them. We have to sort of move through this in stages, and once the information is available to you all, we would want it to be available to the public too. So we would just follow the normal posting process for agendizing.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I guess in essence, colleagues, every weekend after March 29th belongs to the review. There'll be no vacations after that. Yes. And I'm not laughing at it. This is important work, and so we want to make sure we've got time to do it properly. Are there any more questions? Seeing none, thank you. This is information and discussion. Good luck. Please stay healthy and enjoy. Appreciate your expertise. Now we will move to 3.05. Yes. I think, yes, okay, all right, change of plans.
We're going to be doing the social workers.
Okay.
Amazing. I was running down the hallway.
You are very powerful, let me just say. So
This is amazing, isn't it?
I'm going to turn to board counsel, and since we approved, it's fine. Okay, so we had changed you up with COVID, but COVID lost. You won. Welcome. All right, let me read the agenda item so everyone knows what we're doing here. 3.02, recognition of school social workers and discussion of their role in schools to support students, families, and academic achievement. And this is for information and discussion only. Welcome. Look at all those smiles. Oh, and you can see them.
Thank you so much. Trustee Nicolette, Superintendent McNeil, and members of the Board of Trustees. For the record, my name is Catherine Loudon, and I coordinate school counseling and our emerging school social workers. And as many of you are aware, this is National Social Work Month for all social workers, and we can celebrate all social workers. But the very first full week of March every year is National School Social Work Week. And as you will hear today, our school social workers are incredible, and they're going to give you a lot of detail. The theme for National School Social Work Week this year is a time to shine. So I will have very little to say in this presentation, and I will turn it over to our esteemed school social workers that we have here today. We have Katrina Galley from North Valleys High School, and Anna Jenkins, who's spent a great deal of time over the last few years at O'Brien and is now working with us also with Project Aware. And in the center is Beth Schrader, and Beth Schrader takes very much a leadership role in our office with school social work and is a school social work crisis counselor. I also want to mention Eric Olson, who's an administrator in our office and helps promote and support school social workers. He was unable to be here today due to some family illness issues, but he sends very much his excitement about this as well. So I'm going to turn it over in Beth's capable hands and leadership and introduce you to our school social workers.
There is a button you push. It has a little like icon.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. My name is Beth Schrader, a school social worker in the crisis department, for the record. And so if we could have the next slide, please. Oh, yes.
Power. Sort of.
doesn't like me. For a moment. Oh, anyway, I'm just going to go over the overview very quickly. Today, we just really want to give you a brief overview of kind of what social work does in schools, why we believe it's so incredibly vital. We'll have some information about how it's grown within the Washoe County School District, what exactly qualifies someone as a school social worker, what we do in regards to mental health supports in schools, and then there's going to be some testimonials from the two wonderful people that are seated next to me. So, the next thing that we're all going to talk about on the slide, I did it, so I kind of have it memorized. Oh, there we go. Perfect. The next slide is, this was actually inputted by our wonderful boss's boss, Dr. Lamarca. He believed this was an important quote, and I agree with him. A growing body of evidence suggests that the safest and most effective schools tend to be characterized by trusting, warm, and supportive relationships among staff, students, and parents. School social workers are at the heart of this work and provide critically important services directly to students. They are also dedicated to providing comprehensive supports that address many of the out-of-school needs that limit students' learning. And so I think as we move on to the next slide, which is going to be our national model, we are really that homeschool connection. We have a home visiting program as a school district, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. It is my favorite thing to do as a social worker. It is that connection of getting out of the institution of being in a school and getting into the home to talk about what's going on with the family and meet the family on their terms and with their strengths and their hopes and joys and the things that they want for their children within education. We are governed by an ethical code. So the National Association of Social Workers has a very tightly bound ethical code. And because we are all licensed by the Social Work Board of Examiners of Nevada, we have to follow that. The other thing that we get the opportunity to do, which is so much fun, is that we're licensed social workers before we're actually school social workers. So we get the opportunity to advocate for students and families on a completely different level sometimes. And that is very cool, and it's just wonderful to be able to do that for our families. The other thing that makes it so great is that we are very much so evidence data-based driven. Our practices have to be evidence-based. They have to be molded after things that have been reviewed and centered around what is best for children and families. And we use a lot of that with the things that we do. So, thank you.
So this is my slide. For the record, it's Catherine Loudon, and I'll let you know a little bit about the history and how we came to the point where we are with our school social workers. When I became the counseling coordinator in 2010, we didn't have a school social worker, a licensed school social worker employed by Washoe County School District. We had task force that were meeting and discussing the concept of school social work in schools. We had, through special education, through English language learning, different grants, started exploring ways that we could add social work. And in about 2014, we started adding school social workers to our staff. We were able to fund through the general fund through Piccolo Elementary School some social workers. We also started collaborating with the University of Nevada, Reno School of Social Work, and there was a trailblazing intern named Amber Reed who came to work in schools and under the counseling department as a school social worker. And so she started. In 2014-15 school year, we were able to, as a part of the Project Prevent Peace grant, hire Eric Olson and Beth Schrader. And they started working on slowly adding to the social work group. Then, as a part of the outcome for Sandoval's School Safety Task Force, we had, through the Nevada Department of Education, the Social Workers in Schools grant, and we were able to receive through that grant allocations for school social workers, the pathway to build other mental health professionals, including our safe school professionals. And then we were able to work that budget up to over $4 million. In the last couple of years, we also received the Project Aware grant, which stands for Advancing Wellness and Resilience Education, which includes components for building our mental health workforce, which includes school social workers. And when the Nevada Department of Education and the state of Nevada made decisions to transfer the social workers in schools funding to the general fund, our superintendent, Kristen McNeil, and you as a board of trustees prioritized school social workers and mental health professionals as something that would be continually funded and built in our schools. And so we have been able to anticipate an increase in school social workers as more school social workers come to us in our district. We had some positions that we were unable to fill this year, but as we look into next school year, we are able to retain all of our school social workers and build our school social workers and our school social work field.
Katrina Galley, North Valleys High School, just to remind you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how school social workers might differ from school counselors and school psychs. So we do a lot with the social emotional behavior assessments. Our direct services are more therapeutic based. We do a lot of one-on-one. We can offer groups for students where we talk through what they might be struggling with that they have in common. We work a lot within our community to find current resources. We connect with the agencies so we keep that working relationship open, and we can engage in professional case management. So we would meet with the students on a more regular basis and their families when needed, and also talk with those outside agencies as well when needed and if we have permission by the parents. School counselors do a lot of direct services within the classroom. They also work for student advisement and schedule building, career building, things like that, where you look forward to like your postgraduate stuff. They focus a lot on more of the academics. Obviously, they do care a lot about the social emotional as well, and they follow the ASCA national model. School psychs do a lot with the special education, obviously. They do the testing, observation, documentation, IEPs, behavioral threat assessments, data-driven practices. We all meet where we're offering our direct services, where we are working together to help to provide a well-rounded team for our students. We all follow the multi-tiered systems of supports, crisis intervention, family engagement, and screening. Next slide. Thanks. So we do, like I stated, a lot of direct services to students. We worked with our community as a liaison, services to parents and families. So that might look like providing a list of local resources, food pantries, where they can get gas cards, just helping them hop over those barriers that they encounter. Services to districts, services to school personnel. We do work with a lot of our teachers for those same reasons. Sometimes they're needing resources for themselves or their families, and we keep everything confidential. So it's a nice, safe place for them to go as well as the students. And then we also engage in policy practice and research as well.
Trustee Smith.
Thank you. Could we go back one slide right before this? So I love this slide so much. I think a version of this would be really great on our own district webpage. I think that you've outlined how the roles work together beautifully. I think that this is really great. So I just wanted to provide that feedback because I found this very helpful, because when I knew we were talking about this and I saw the materials, one of the first questions I had was, well, how does this layer on to the other support teams that we have? And I think the slide does a really good job of it. So
thanks. Yeah, it definitely outlines it. We all definitely work together, but we have our own little niches as well.
And yes, Trustee Smith, we can put it up on the website as well, too.
All right, continue, please.
Beth Schrader, just for the record, again, I apologize. Our colleague Paige Rath was supposed to be here for the next two slides. So one of the great things that we have as school social workers is that we are master's level educated. So in the field of social work, that makes you a mental health professional. It does not necessarily make us a clinician. We can't bill for services. We can't diagnose those style of things. But the services that we can provide can be mental health related. They can be therapeutic in origin, and they can be specific for each or specific and individualized to each student or family that we're working with. as you have seen over the last, I think more intensely over the last 3 years, but growing over the last, I would say 50 years, is that increased need for functional mental health supports within the school setting. And as we see an increase in school social workers, we are able to meet those needs at school level and at sometimes a broader level, depending on what is occurring with the family. We really want to keep that as one of the pieces that keeps us a little bit separate and a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for? Focused when it comes to our work within schools. We are mental health practitioners, and we are very, very proud of that. And the opportunity to be able to be in schools and work with students on that level is incredibly important. So training and certifications. I love this slide because I'm super proud of the things that I've been able to accomplish and that our colleagues are able to accomplish. So in order to be a school social worker within the Washoe County School District, you must obtain a master's degree in a social work program from an accredited university or college. And the reason for that is that in order to be licensed by the Nevada Social Work Board of Examiners, you must have that criteria. Then you get the opportunity to get licensed, which is a really big test, and says that you're a competent social worker. And then on top of that, you then have to prove to the Nevada Department of Education that you are skilled in working with youth and families and have some knowledge of schools. So when you present to get your NDE endorsement in school social work, you have to meet a list of criteria prepared for by them that says that you will be effective working in a school. What we know about working in education is that it is a unique place. It's a unique system. And so by setting up those requirements that NDE has, it helps push forward the best candidates to be placed in schools and to make sure that we're getting someone that not only is licensed but also has that endorsement from the Nevada Department of Ed. Nevada is one of a handful of states that does that. And that makes it even, I left a state, and that was one of the coolest things moving here, was that that is an option. So some states are picking up on it now, but it is still just a handful of states where where an education department is saying, this is so important, we need to make sure that we're putting in the right people in our system.
Anna Jenkins for the record. So we currently in Washoe County have 12 school social workers who are certified employees of the district. As Beth was saying, we are mental health professionals and we are evaluated under the school social work model specific for social work. Next slide, please. So we are recruiting more. 12 is not enough. We would love to have many, many more. One of the ways that we're doing that is through the school-based mental health grant. And through that, we have opportunities for interns to come in, and with their internship, they can apply for a stipend. And the supervisors that oversee them also get a stipend with that. There's also professional development that's offered to continue to grow the practice and recruit people in. Throughout the state, as was mentioned before, we do also have, through the school, social workers in school, grant, our safe school professional role. And that has been a really good opportunity for a lot of our school social workers to get into the schools, get that school experience that is required for you to get your license and become certified as a school social worker. Next slide.
So just kind of in closing, we put some testimonials in there because that's the connection of what we're actually doing in schools, and Beth Schrader for the record, and the connection of what makes this work so amazing is being in schools. And so we're going to start, they're going to read their testimonial. So Anna Jenkins is going to go first, and then Katrina.
Anna Jenkins for the record. Working within a school allows us to create amazing relationships with the students, families, and staff. Not only are we there to support in times of need or crisis, but we also get to be a member of the school community, celebrate their victories, and continue to build those relationships on a daily basis.
Katrina Galley. I'm not going to read mine. I feel weird reading it. I just want you to know that I love working with my students. I love teenagers. I don't know how I'll feel when my kids are teenagers, but right now I love teenagers. And I love walking their journey with them. You know, freshman and sophomore years are hard. You're trying to figure out who you are. You're trying to find your friends. You're learning about toxic people. You're just trying to find yourself. And it's really empowering to be able to walk along with a student throughout their high school career and see them come over these obstacles and find themselves. And it's nice to be able to empower them to then lead their own life and make their own decisions. And I love seeing the before and after. And I love having that relationship with them. There are times, obviously, where they might go down a different path, and that's okay. Because our job is just to empower them to make their best choices and be the best version of themselves. So, and also, thank you guys for your support of school social work. I just like to say that too.
I'm going to read Claudia Amaya's testimonial. Claudia wasn't able to be here today, and she is a school social worker at Piccolo. And it says, whether in the midst of an emotional, academic, or nutritional crisis, Claudia Amaya has provided these students with the outstanding level of support that each individual student requires in order to be both successful here at school and in the outside world. She provides them with meals when they're hungry, empathy when in crisis, and intervention strategies which bridge the wide gap between family life and academia. And I will tell you that when you hear from school principals that have had a school social worker or school counselors who have worked shoulder to shoulder with a school social worker, they can't say enough about them and how incredible they are and all the things that they do. And in fact, in the middle school lead counselor meeting this morning, they were, kind of bantering back and forth about having enough and wanting more and needing one in every school. And those are the same things that I hear in the high school lead counselor meetings. They very much are our partners. The individuals here have taught us so much. And I want to give special credit to Beth Schrader, because when she came and moved all the way across the country, she had me to teach about school social work and a body of counselors and school psychologists who had never worked with them quite the same way before, except for maybe through family resource or human services type situations. And she has taught so much to me about school social work. And I know you guys are nervous about time, but I want to tell you that your boss's boss said we have plenty of time, so you can answer questions. And we also have a present for you. So I don't know if you have any questions for that's the last slide? Oh, okay, great. Yeah, okay. So I'm going to open it up for questions now for the school social workers to answer.
Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you very much for coming. I'm really proud of the work that you do, and you're welcome to come over to my house and see my teen girls anytime. Really, thank you. Mental health is such an important issue. I'm curious, as much work as you do with our students, do we provide any mental health support to our staff or teachers?
Yes, absolutely. So in my role within crisis response for the district, we definitely meet with our teachers and staff and continue those supports after we've left the building. And we can meet with teachers and other staff who are wanting to come down to talk about what's going on. We do a lot of resource finding for our staff, like the things that we do for our families on a regular basis. Our staff are included in that. So we have staff that come down and request something about housing. We have staff that come down and request something about their need of mental health support for their student or for their own family member. And so we do a lot for our staff. I would say that has quadrupled in the last 3 years, the amount of support that we provide for staff.
I'd like to add to that too, if you don't mind, Katrina Galley. I don't know if that's appropriate. So we also have one of our colleagues, especially during COVID, as teachers were so burdened with everything, that provided some group work to our teachers to be able to process what they were going through and what they were feeling. And I felt that was pretty powerful, and we do continue to do that as needed as well.
Trustee Minetto.
Thank you. Madam Vice President. You're just exuding with excitement about this, and it's so wonderful to see. You know, we all have children we know in many of the schools, and it's just wonderful. Thank you for what you do. I just love you love what you do. You love the kids, and that that oozes from you, and I like it.
I will ask a question, but first I will make a little statement. Having served previously on the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission, I want to give a shout out to that group because they have championed for not only counselors but social workers for years, and their work has paid off because they understand the connection between healthy living and student performance. So to that point, can you give us some stories, some evidence? I know you've got it, that shows that your work positively impacts student performance.
I'll go first. This is Beth Schrader again for the record. I had the opportunity to engage with a student for the first time on a Sunday evening. Catherine called me and said, hey, we've got this situation kind of brewing, and it came through from one of our crisis call centers in the area. And she said, the student is in need of some support. Will you please reach out? I first engaged with the student and the family on a Sunday evening. I met the student that Monday morning at their high school. The student was disengaged from learning, was disinterested in graduation, had fallen a complete year behind, and was also struggling with some suicidal ideation, and just was in a really low point in their kind of existence at that moment in time. We were able to get the student connected with mobile crisis response. We were able to get the student a case manager. We were able to get the student a therapist. The student is still currently seeing their therapist and talks to me regularly. The student is now on track to graduate and should graduate on time this June.
Congratulations. Suffice it to say, you're relationship builders? Yes. Thank you. Any other beautiful stories? I know you have many. Maybe one more.
Katrina Galley. I don't have a specific one, to be honest. I see a lot of my students who are struggling with crisis, whether that's suicidal thoughts, whether that's maybe they've been sexually assaulted, or maybe they have had some big trauma to overcome. And through being able to meet with them and help them talk to their parents, not all students know how to talk to their parents, and not all students have supportive parents. Most do. They just don't know it until they talk to them. And so being able to help bridge that gap and provide them a safe place to come at school when they're in their feelings, or when people are questioning them, if it's somebody else that's in the school and they're hearing rumors, it really helps. I've seen those students progress past that and then be happier and make new connections and advocate for themselves within a relationship, whether that's romantic or friendship, depends on what the situation was, and then you get to see them graduate. So I would say, I don't know where students would be if they didn't have a place like that to go. I know they have their counselors, but we're just an additional resource and an additional place for them to go. So I don't know what would happen if they didn't have that. But I like to think that we helped with that. So.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do. Any other questions? Trustee Smith?
I don't have a question, but I have another thing in your presentation that I love. I don't know, I think it's slide 8 is the slide that this is on, and I love this so much. I want it on a t-shirt. It's mental health is directly related to children's learning and development. So everything that we do here is really based on student outcomes and wanting those best outcomes for whatever their next chapter is. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing to support their mental health, because that's really what connects to the learning and the outcome. So thank you so much.
All right. I will also say thank you. And I don't know if you're going to do anything special for spring break, but I hope you are. Take care of yourself. Thank you very much.
So I have something for you guys, and then we want to take your picture at the board meeting. Well, right?
And before you do that, Miss Catherine, or as you're passing out whatever that is that I don't see you bringing forward.
What did you say?
I just want to thank you all so much on behalf of leadership team and all of our teachers and our staff and our students and their families. Because without our social workers and our counselors, our teachers can't do the work that they need to do. And that tie is absolutely immense. And I know, Beth and I, we go back some time when she was here trying to tell Catherine and I what a social worker does. And we have done leaps and bounds from that time. So thank you so very, very much. And everything that you all do for our students counts so much every single day. So thank you.
So we want you to turn around, and Troy Parks just reminded me that was from your boss's boss's boss. Oh.
All right, thank you very much. I have been informed that there is food here, so we will take I don't know what time, that's too much glare, I can't tell. It's only 3:25, so do we want to go through one more? Yes. 3 out. We lost. As it should be.
Okay, so the health district will not be on the phone, and we don't want to do zoning before 4 o'clock. So, okay.
Oh, okay.
No, we don't want to do that before 4 o'clock, though. Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, then you have to.
Then we will take a 20-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we are on 3.05, discussion and possible action to review and provide direction to current COVID-19 mitigation measures in effect for the 2021-22 school year, including facilities management, transportation, staff and student exclusions and face coverings for district facilities and school sites based on current federal, state, and local guidance for possible action. Welcome.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette, Dr. McNeil, members of the board. For the record, Paul LaMarca, Chief Strategies Officer, and I think I'll turn it over to Kristen to kind of get us rolling.
Thank you very much, Dr. LaMarca. I'd also like to welcome, I believe, Mr. Kevin Dick is on Zoom, the Washoe County Health District Officer. Hello, Kevin. There he is.
Good afternoon.
All right.
How is everybody?
Good. Thank you, sir. So,
and we have.
Oh, go ahead. And you also do you have another
Dr.
staff
McNeil,
member?
We got Dr. Nancy Dow on as well. She's our Division Director for Epidemiology and Public Health Preparedness.
Perfect. Welcome aboard, Nancy. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so just very quickly, as we skipped to the next slide, just as a, oops, okay. Technical difficulties. Back away from the remote, Dr. LaMarca. There we are. Yeah, put that over there. So we have our guiding principles, no changes there. The last board action, there you are on February 22nd. This had to do with the board continuing to work with the Washoe County Health District, and that's why we are here today to present our plan, our mitigation plan as we move forward for the rest of this year into summer and into the next school year. And so we will move to the slide that shows the beginning of the data. There we go. And I'm going to turn it over back to Dr. LaMarca.
Thank you, Superintendent McNeil. So just spent a very quick amount of time on data. We are still in the orange region as a community. The score is 6.5. It was today as well as the day we put this together. Overall trends look very good. On the next slide, We've got the dashboard. This is updated weekly. Again, everything is moving in the right direction. On the following slide, you're very used to seeing this. This is the cases per 100,000 on a weekly window. So not a 30-day window, but a 7-day window. And this is good news. With the exception of one group, all of the groups, adults and younger, are below 5 cases per 100,000 on a 7-day average. That's kind of where we want to be. And then on the following slide, with test positivity, we continue to move in the right direction. As of today, test positivity, as reported at the state site, for the community is at 8.5%. So we're getting close to that 5% threshold that the CDC talked about very early on. If you have any questions about data, we can talk about it. We're going to move into the plan, and Jen's going to talk about the plan a little bit. As you know, through Directive 052, districts were required to develop a plan. It had to include certain elements, something about outbreaks, something about testing, something about face masks, and some additional things. And Jen will touch on that. And what we needed to do is work with our local health district and get their approval. And so we have received their approval. And again, Jen will talk about the plan. I did want to take a moment. I know Mr. Dick and Dr. Dow are on the call, and I just want to personally extend thank you to them for working with us. It has been a very difficult 2 years for everyone involved. We have met with the health district sometimes multiple times per week. Jen is on speed dial with several of the folks over there. They've been nothing but responsive. We haven't always agreed, but we've always been able to work through issues. So I can't say enough about the collaboration with them. And with that, on the next slide, I'll turn it over to Jen. She'll talk about the actual plan.
Jennifer Crane, for the record, Director of Student Health Services. So our plan that we submitted to the Washoe County Health Department on February 24th included the following elements: encouraging vaccinations, use of the self-screener, and continued use of layered mitigation strategies, testing, contact tracing and exclusion, face mask use, outbreak response, and reporting. Many of these things that we put in, our elements, are things that we are currently doing. There wasn't huge changes in what we were currently doing. Any questions? Okay.
Please continue.
All right. So
on that slide, you also see that the Washoe County Health District provided us a letter of approval on February 25th. Since then, there's been some changes. There was a change in CDC guidance relative to transportation that required us to submit a minor revision. They approved that revision. We had a couple of other minor revisions that we needed. They've approved all of our plans. I think on the next slide, in terms of next steps, attached in the board materials, there were several attachments. Some of those include some definitions. I think the acronym is CSTE, and it has to do with territorial epidemiologists, and I can't remember what CNS stand for, maybe state and council. There you go. There's some information in there regarding outbreaks that we've relied on with the Washoe County Health District. I think what I want to say is, depending on what you do tonight, if you adopt the approved plan, it's already been embedded in draft form into our opening schools document. Thank you to Michelle Anderson, the Communications Department, for integrating this. This is a primary communication tool for all of our principals. It would also be posted at our website, so it would be publicly available. And I think that's it. I don't think we have a lot more unless you have some questions, certainly for Mr. Dick and the Health District and or us.
All right, we'll bring it back to the table here. Any questions?
Could Could
All right,
I
I'm going to
provide
go
just
to public
could I provide just a brief comment?
Please,
This is
Mr.
Kevin.
Dick.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to mention, Dr. Lamarca mentioned the risk meter that we have, the Truckee Meadows risk meter that was developed here locally. And a lot of work went into that had served us really well through the pandemic. It was done by a group actually that the Mayor Sheeby kicked off. They met last night and are actually discussing changes to the risk meter and how we continue to use that, because I think that the level of the risk meter is now showing a level of risk that's higher than we're actually at with the community. And it's somewhat skewed by the measures of hospital staffed bed occupancy, which are no longer being driven so much by the COVID-19 patients, just as more of the general health needs in the community and the staffing problems that healthcare is facing, as well as the test positivity rate, which is a lagging number under the state's county tracker, 14-day average with a 7-day delay. So we're actually, I think, below those levels, which is quite encouraging. And I just also want to acknowledge all the work that the school district staff have done through this in working with the health district. We've all faced unimaginable challenges over the last couple of years, and I wanted to follow on Dr. Lamarca's remarks and express our appreciation for us being able to all work together and work through this. I think we're in a much better position today as far as our path forward through and out of this pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Trustee Rodriguez.
Not so much questions, but I do want to make a statement. I want to thank you all for what you guys have done, and I'm happy that we're out of masks. I'm glad to see our kids are not, they're able to take a school bus and not have to wear them there, and that we're doing everything we can to implement this stuff to try to return to some sense of normalcy. So I want to appreciate all the work you guys have done, and the county health department as well. So thank you guys.
May I say a quick comment? It really goes to Jen Crane, her leadership, and another woman within her department named Leslie Alfrey, who you've heard her name before. Leslie's been incredible. I can't imagine how many hours she's worked in the last 2 years. These guys deserve the credit for what we've done, I think. As well as plant facilities, the whole COVID team. It has impacted every single person. Our jobs are different today than they were, but in terms of the health focus, Jen has done a very good job, and her staff, I can't say enough good things about them.
Thank you. Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Vice. I'd be remiss if I didn't at least sort of echo Trustee Rodriguez. It feels like, it's somewhat solemn, but it feels like, things have really returned to normal. And I think we'll look back at this time and see how this community really came together, local governments and all different sectors. And I'm grateful for all the work and effort that you and your team have put together, along with Kevin Dick in the Health District. I know it's been one of those scenarios in our history where it was very difficult to find that balance, and so I'm really pleased that we're going down this path that we are. So thank you very much for all your help and your dedication.
We have 2 public comment cards, so let's move to public comment.
Pablo Nava Duran.
Oops.
That's okay. I keep my hands on.
We'll go back to that.
Public comment. So I'm gonna let you know that science is not the truth. Science is finding the truth. Like sometimes, if a science, or if a bio like organism what predicted to be offside, then they're finding like more research, and science can be found on more research on that. And sometimes I look at the penetration and it seems like it is high, and despite the Washington County, this district is becoming optional, and then they follow the Carson City School District's guidelines, and then we know the buzz, and then FBI and the CAD tell we should get rid of mask mandate for public meditations, and then you follow the suit to become more optional for the public meditation, not their student or parent choice, and if parents want to give their children to wear a mask, and then children will have to wear a mask. If it's parents decide to not to wear a mask, children do not have to wear a mask. And if parents decide for student choice instead of parent choice, based on their parent decision, students should wear a mask or not. That's very clear, simple. And then for the vaccine, I think that we should provide a vaccine research for the student for under 18. For under 18, you have to ask for parental permission, because I don't want to happen in Tennessee. The health department got fired last year, so we got to ask a permission for the parent to get a COVID vaccine. If 18 is and older for Washington County School District, take the vaccine without parent permissions. And we do know. We don't know that the cases, COVID cases went down without a mask mandate. That's very good. And a positive rate that's down without a mask mandate, which is also good. And we know the risk meter is high, but I think the district should be placed with mask optional or vaccine optional, whatever you call, and then wait till the cases went down, unless there was a major emergency for COVID. So I like to say thank you for taking care of a student, and on our hearts for our parents. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duran.
Melanie Sutton.
Good afternoon, Melanie.
Hello, Ms. Sutton. Nice
Good
to
morning,
see you.
or afternoon. I left this morning. Been at meetings all day. Melanie Sutton, for the record. Officially yesterday, I'm school board candidate for District C. So good luck on keeping that seat, Joe Rodriguez. Don't get comfortable there. I would also like to say thank you, Dick, for showing up. What is your specialty? Nothing. You don't have any specialty in this area, and I'd like to know.
Ms. Sutton.
No, this is about this. What is their specialty?
Let's not call people out like that, please.
I didn't say anything mean. What is these people's specialty as far as the COVID-19? What is your specialty?
Mrs. Sutton, please.
No, I'm going to call. I want to know what their specialty is.
Keep your information, your public comment to sharing.
And you're not supposed to interrupt me. You're using my time. I want to know what their specialty is, because your statistics are ridiculous. And what you guys are doing to our children, you have been abusing our children for 2 years. 2 years. That's why I'm here. And that's why I'm running for school board, is for our children. For our children, because you've been abusing them. And the fact that you want to vaccinate them, it's not a vaccine. What a vaccine prevents disease. Prevents disease. It does not prevent disease. This does not prevent disease. They still get infected, right? And our young children do not get affected by this disease. Period. Look at the science, right? Science. Let's do science. What is the science? The science tells you that you'll still contract COVID-19, even if you have the vaccine, right? And our children are less affected by COVID-19 than anything else. So why are you going to force this on our children? And that's why I'm here. So, I have a few more minutes. Let me figure out. I lost my focus. Actually, I think I did say everything I wanted to say in my rant, but I appreciate it, and I'll speak to you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton.
Mike Krogan.
JG, I'm sorry I missed that name. Help me.
Mike Krogan.
Hello. Hello, Mr. Krogan. Welcome.
Hello, everybody. Mike Krogan. I live in Reno. Mr. Merriweather, did you say you had a child maybe in the teenage years? And does that child go to school here? Yeah. I was just curious because the word hour was used so often just a few minutes ago. I wonder if that included your kid. I know it didn't include mine, and I have a few, not in the school district, but more than the average. And I'm here just to thank you for what you have done in parading, or ushering is a better word, the kids through these last 2 years. It ain't been easy. And I heard you at the last meeting I was at whining yourselves about the masks and the face shields and the inconveniences that we went through. I would like to say that we did those for our own protection, but we also did them for the protection of our neighbors, something that we do every day by mandated law. And when those mandates get to be too unbearable or unuseful, we are able to cast them aside because we have elected representatives who will provide that service for us. So I just want to say thanks for the mandate, thanks for the pain in the face with the masks and all that, and just keep that kind of thing up. It's important for not only us big people in this room, but the little people too. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Krogan.
That's all I have for this item.
All right, thank you. And we can return back to discussion. All right, let's revisit discussion. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. President Taylor, you're on.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I know I had to step away for a moment. I'm at a work thing. But anyway, it was good. I was glad to be able to catch the end of this, and I really just wanted to, as one of the two people on the board that's kind of endured, if you will, from the very beginning of the pandemic throughout to the end. I really just wanted to just thank. I know everyone is thank people, but I have to tell you, especially as we began. I am so appreciative of the health district and the way the health district and the school district could come together and work together, even when we didn't always agree. And even when it's very, very public. I know that isn't easy to do, and so we just really appreciate your help with putting the plan together where we are now, from all the way back to the beginning. And yes, we're in school. And it certainly wasn't your advice, but you didn't turn your back. You continued to stay in there and work and prioritize cases of students and the contact tracers and all of those things that are necessary when the community works together. And so I just want to thank our team, Dr. LaMarca, Jen. I know Jen replaced someone who also did an amazing job. All the nurses in the building and the nurses' aides and the teachers, the people in the building, the custodians, everybody who had a part in this thing, as difficult as it has been, as challenging as it has been, sometimes as confusing as it has been, as thankless sometimes as it has been, and all of that, you continue to do the work. And so as a person who's written this whole thing out for 2 years, myself and Trustee Minetto, I just couldn't go by without thanking everyone who made some things happen. And a special thank you, as I said, to Mr. Dick, you and your team, for hanging in, working through and all of that so we can get to the point where we are today. So just really just had to say thank you for the whole 2-year journey, and may we never have to do it again.
Thank you, President Taylor. I would just like to support that, having been a viewer of virtual meetings and attending in person when we finally could. I heard the struggles, I heard the worry, I heard the hopes, and that group of 7 did amazing work, and that was not easy. So thank you to Ellen and Angie and the past trustees. Okay, Trustee Smith.
Thank you so much, Vice President Nicolette. Absolutely, just want to say thank you so much, and it's such an honor to be here. I do plan on making a motion, and there's so much honor in that because this is the work of so many, including the board members at this dais, and it's really a wonderful day to be at. So thank you so much for the partnership with the health department and to our whole staff. And I would be interested in making a motion if there's no more comment on that. Or did you want?
I would leave that for you, but I do want to make one more comment.
Okay.
Trustee Rodriguez, please.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. I again just want to thank you. I know my opponent doesn't see things the same way, and I look forward to the day that this agenda item is no longer here. And again, I just want to reiterate, thank you. I know we're coming out of this, and we're coming to the tail end, and I just look forward to the day this is no longer an agenda item. And again, thank you. I appreciate what you guys do, all of us.
Thank you. All right. Trustee Smith.
All right. This is an exciting moment. I can't wait to see who's going to get in on the second. I move that the Board of Trustees accepts the COVID-19 mitigation plan developed in conjunction with and approved by the Washoe County Health District.
Second.
All right, so we have a first, Trustee Smith, and a second, Trustee Mayberry. Any more discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Passes 7-0. Good work. Thank you. And I don't know if you're going to take a spring break, but you sure deserve it.
So thank you very much, Vice President Nicolette. And before you two leave, you know how emotional I get, but this is, woo! This board made some very, very brave decisions when we decided to open up our schools. And Kevin, I know you and I have gone around the bat, and sir, thank you so much. And you know, we don't always agree, but you always come around and you know what's right for our children. So thank you so much. And I hear Heather is taking a well-deserved vacation since 2 years ago. That lady has not had a vacation, and goodness gracious, she absolutely deserves it. So please, she better not be listening to this, but please thank her for us for all of her support to Dr. LaMarca and Jen Crane and Leslie Alfrey. And a huge shout out to our COVID team, to our principals, to our secretaries, to our bus drivers, to everyone that went through this, our school police officers, everyone that was able to have our kids safely in our schools. So thank you so very, very much. You guys are amazing.
Absolutely.
And Dr. McNeil, I just
Yes.
wanted to thank you for mentioning Heather Kerwin as well. She's just been incredible. And while we didn't always agree, I always respected the decision and the intentions and the larger context within which those decisions were made by the Board of Trustees. So, thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right. Well, we're at 3:05. We're done, right? Oh, wait, we took them out of order. Okay. Thank you. All right, let's move back up to 3.03. I will read as our illustrious guest. Yep. Do you want, do I have to state it that way? Mm-hmm. Yes. And thank you for the reminder, Board Counsel. We will be taking 303 and 304 together. They're both related to zoning. And I will read both of them, so I'll take a deep breath while you get yourself prepared. 3.03, approval of the recommendations from the Zoning Advisory Committee to modify enrollment boundaries to the following schools effective 2023-24 school year. Double Diamond Elementary School, Nick Polikitis Elementary School, Donner Springs Elementary School, Hidden Valley Elementary School, Edward Pine Middle School, Kendall DePoli Middle School, Earl Wooster High School, and Damani Ranch High School for possible action, to be combined with 3.04, approval of the recommendations from the Zoning Advisory Committee to modify the enrollment boundaries of the following schools in the South Meadows area of Washoe County as a result of the construction of new elementary school in the Rio Wrangler area, effective the 2023-24 school year. Brown Elementary School, Nick Polikitis Elementary School, Kendall DePoli Middle School, Marcy Hers Middle School, Galena High School, and Damani Ranch High School, also for possible action. Thank you, and welcome our esteemed experts.
Thank you, Trustee Nicolette, Vice President. For the record, Lauren Ford, I am the staff liaison for the Zoning Advisory Committee and your area superintendent in the Washoe County School District. With me here is Christine Hull. She is our chair of the Zoning Advisory Committee, and Adam Searcy, the man who needs no introduction.
True story.
For the record. The sole man on our panel today. I have the remote. Here we go. So I just want to rezone us.
Okay.
Get us acclimated.
Musical
I'm just trying
chairs?
to be funny. Okay. So get us acclimated. So our Zoning Advisory Committee is a 13-member community. These are people who live within the communities that they are representing, right? Some of them are appointed by trustees. Some run for our at-large positions. And some are appointed by the associations in our Washoe County School District. So we have a member from the Teachers Association and the Principal Association and our ESPs. Our roles of what we do on this committee is governed by Admin Reg 7107 and Board Policy 7105. When we look at rezoning, we look at programs that are offered in our zoning. Sometimes we have GT programs, sometimes we have special education programs. We look at transportation, costs of transportation. Are students currently bused? Would they be bused? Are they in a walking zone area, then would receive transportation? We look at all those factors. We present those factors through our presentation, Adam does, for the members of our committee to look at. We always reacclimate our committee with the board policy and admin reg as we're going through the options that we have. Grandfathered variances, as they're referred to officially, is for the students entering the highest level of that school. So for example, if you're a fourth grader and you're going to be heading into fifth grade, you can remain at that school. It's an automatic variance. You also receive a sibling variance. So your sibling can stay if they're in a younger grade level. For high school students, it's for their junior and senior year. The reason for that has to do with the athletic eligibility and for other factors related to high school. So if you're on a CTE pathway, we couldn't have you change schools. So we do that grandfather variance for their junior and senior year at the high school level.
Hi, everybody. I'm Christine Hull. I'm the chair of the zoning committee. And I just want to say that one of the things that we've always used as guidance is this admin regulation 7107, but we've taken special care this year to really align our decisions and our conversations and discussions using this regulation as well as the board policy 7105. The biggest things that I want to point out is subdivisions staying together and attending the same school, right? We don't want neighbors going to different schools. We know that that's happened in this area as we've grown, but as we're adjusting zones, we look at that. We want to create those compact attendance zones with few or no island areas. That's really important to us so that the maps don't look crazy, right? I'm a social studies teacher by trade, and so I often think of that the famous gerrymandering cartoon. We don't want those. We don't want the island areas because it really aligns for transportation and it aligns for our feeder patterns, which is our next one that we really, really focus on. We want a whole elementary to go to a whole middle school, and then that whole middle school to go to that high school. My daughter is currently about to go into high school, and it is a big deal to get to all your friends. It's a really big deal, and for a long time we've had big split feeders. I used to teach at Sparks Middle School, and I had kids go to 6 different high schools, and I can tell you that is really, really stressful for 8th graders. So I appreciate all the work that we've done, especially Adam's office, making sure that our feeder schools are in alignment with that. And of course, transportation is a big topic of conversation for us at our meetings. So we really, really take this guidance very seriously at our meetings. At the beginning of every single year of our calendar year with zoning, we get a great presentation from Neil Rombardo, our chief counsel with Washoe County, and we go through not only open meeting law, but we also really look at the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution. Like I said, I'm a social studies teacher, so this stuff gets me really happy that we get to have these opportunities. But I get jazzed. Yes, thank you, Lauren. I get a little excited about the U.S. Constitution. And so we also take into consideration, U.S. Constitution, open meeting law, and all of those really important pieces. So we just wanted to reorient everyone to what we do on the Zoning Advisory Committee.
So for the items that we're going to discuss today, we have met, as you can see up there, from October through February in regards to these items. The first time we met at Verdi, it was just one for discussion only. We didn't take any action on it. We've had it again in November, January, and February. February was when we took voting on the items that you'll see today. As Christine has said, we do begin every initial meeting with a presentation from Chief Legal Counsel Neil Rombardo, and he does go through everything that's expected of our committee and always realigning them to our board policy and our admin regulation. I would like to say that during our meetings, we received lots of public comment, whether in person or by email. And we originally began with 2 options when we discussed Rio Wrangler and opening it up. And based upon the feedback our members of our committee received, they ended up adding and asking questions of Adam and us to come back with more options. Adam presented, I want to say 6 options, but one option had 3 sections to it. So math-wise, that would make 9 options that were presented. One option had an A, B, and a C. So we looked at many different ways of looking at this area, and then ultimately there was a unanimous vote for the option that we're being presented to you today. So now we're going to talk about Daybreak.
Okay, I'll take it from here. For the record, my name is Adam Searcy. I'm the Chief Facilities Management Officer for the school district. We're going to talk about 2 separate recommendations. You guys have them agendized individually. You're opening them concurrently. They are interrelated, but not really as dependent on one another as we have had in the past. So we presented them to the committee separately, and there are 2 separate recommendations. But just diving in on the next slide, please. A little by way of orientation for anybody who hasn't looked at our zoning maps very regularly. We start with the dark blue lines to designate the existing elementary school boundaries, the colors to illustrate the existing middle school boundaries. So you can see kind of the 2 different shades, or 3 rather. The bottom, for example, is all the DePoli zone. And then the darker, heavier gold lines represent the high school boundaries. So that's really what you're looking at. You can see the existing schools, Dodson, Donner Springs, DePoli, Polokitis, etc., represented on this map. And then the unique yellow shading throughout the middle is generally the footprint that's represented by this proposed Talus Valley development. So if we could go on to the next slide, you'll see a more detailed illustration of this master planned residential community. This development, Talus Valley, has been approved to move forward by the city of Reno, and they're in the process of finalizing their design. They're anticipated to begin earthwork in 2022. However, no one lives here currently. So that was really kind of the most important thing to note, that while we were in this community for these meetings, we wanted to take the advantage of the opportunity to adjust these enrollment boundary lines in a way that reflects logical zoning boundaries associated with this development. Right? Historically, they were just drawn through the pasture that would have split these subdivisions down the middle. So before anybody moves into these homes, we wanted to try and set this up for success for decades to come. Just a little orientation on this map. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, you can see Donner Springs Elementary School. Rotating clockwise around, you've got Poliquitas down in the far lower right-hand corner. You can just see DePoli as well on that aerial. So give you your bearings, of course, Double Diamond Elementary School further off to the southwest. Also on this map, the developer and we in turn spoke of it in terms of kind of development areas. So up there on the north again is referred to as Rio Poco North. So that entire pasture land immediately behind Donner Springs Elementary School, if you're familiar with that part of the community, that's going to be Rio Poco North as a part of this Talus Valley development. Clockwise moving around, you've got Veterans Parkway kind of meandering north and south through there. Also Steamboat Creek, of course, on the east side of Veterans Parkway. On the east side of Steamboat Creek, you'll see a development, ultimately a part of Talus Valley, known as Rio Wrangler East. Further, that's South Meadows Parkway and Rio Wrangler Parkway. Further in the center is referred to as Town Center, sort of those orange and yellow colored areas. And then rounding it out, we've got Alexander Lake Quarry. So you can get a sense of the roadway infrastructure that they have to build and all of the work that will ultimately take to build all of these homes. On the right-hand side, you can see this is approximately 3,000 residential units, ultimately anticipated to take as long as 20 plus years to achieve that build out. So while they might break ground in 2022, it will likely be several more years before we see a significant number of residents even occupying these areas, and multiple decades before that illustration is actually fully developed. In that time period, I'll draw your attention also to the center of the exhibit where you see an illustration of a high school site plan, as well as, if you squint hard enough, an elementary school site plan. Those have been master planned into their development in conjunction with the developer. We actually have an agreement between the school district and the developer pertaining to an option to buy, basically, when the time becomes potentially necessary. We've master planned those future school sites into their development. If it's not needed, they could repurpose those into residential units. So before we move on to the next slide, the last thing to point out here is really simplistically the proposed rezoning. So as we saw on the previous slide, the current zones kind of zig and zag through the pasture. Simplistically, what we're proposing in this recommendation is to take all of that Rio Poco North area and zone them into Donner Springs. That's logical for a variety of reasons, but also you'll see on the next slide, we're proposing to zone that same neighborhood up through the existing vertical that Donner Springs exists within. Okay, so Donner Springs itself currently goes to Pine and then DeMonte Ranch High School. So that Rio Poco North area is being proposed to also go Donner Springs, Pine, DeMonte Ranch. Moving clockwise again, Rio Wrangler East is being proposed to be zoned into the Poliquitas Elementary School zone and their associated vertical. So Poliquitas, DePoli, DeMonte Ranch. Town Center is proposed to go to Double Diamond Elementary School. They also go DePoli, DeMonte, and then Alexander Lake Quarry kind of is in the middle. There's a road going to the north and going to the south, And the recommendation that's before you tonight shows Alexander Lake Quarry and the neighborhood associated with that area being zoned for Donner Springs, Pine, and Demonte Ranch High School as well. So again, quite a bit of time associated with that build out, but for starters, before anybody lives there, we wanted to redraw these zoning boundaries so that in 10 years or so, we might come back, evaluate whether we need a new elementary school, evaluate whether or not we need to adjust these zoning boundaries. But that's what's depicted really on the next slide. So if you could page ahead, please, thank you. The table on the top just graphically states what I just described as far as the existing zoning and the proposed zoning and that consistent vertical alignment. The table on the bottom or the middle breaks those 4 areas down by estimated student generation by area at full build out. So I think it's important to note here how we arrive at that, because I talked on the previous slide, we're looking at upwards of 3,000 residential units. What the school district does is to take actual student generation data, sort of a per capita ratio of number of houses and the number of students who are generated on any given year basis from those houses, and create these coefficients. So in the bottom describes student generation rates. What those decimals mean, if you convert them to 100, it says there's on average in this area of town 12 elementary school age students for every 100 single family residential units in this area at any given time. Same, and then it's elementary, middle, high. So 5.2 middle school students, 8.4 high school students. These are updated annually. These are not projections. These are actual empirical numbers, coefficients based on how many students are actually coming out of the homes in these areas. So really important to understand, because I think there's oftentimes questions about, gosh, that seems low, or, I have a perception that, all of my friends and we have children in our house, et cetera. It's important to note sometimes that, these are at any given time. So while, you may have had 3 children and your neighbor may have had 3 children, they're not continuously all in elementary school. At any one given time, there might only be 1 in elementary school, et cetera. So these are our actual student generation rates for these areas. We apply them based not only on the total number of units that are proposed to be built in this area, but the timing in which they're proposed to be built. So a lot of another variable that goes into our projections is the anticipated pace or schedule timing that these houses are expected to come online. And that, as we understand, is a long period of time. I think that's it for this slide. Back to sort of reorientation. This was the same as the first slide, existing zoning without the Daybreak footprint overlaid. So you can see kind of randomly crisscrossing through the pasture. And the next slide is the proposed zoning. Again, you can see all of the area, both the town center and the Rio Poco North in the Donner Springs area. Puliquitas, Double Diamond, etc. That's what it looks like on a map when those proposed changes are introduced. And this final slide shows the existing enrollment numbers on the top, assuming the recommendation in the next item, and then the proposed enrollments incorporating these changes and the projected growth associated with Daybreak. So you can see some increases in the numbers really across the board as those students living in this area are introduced into the enrollment numbers through the end of this decade. But really you don't see a large spike because of the time that it will take to generate 100, 500, 1,000 residential units that actually generate enough students to show significant enrollment growth in these zoned areas. I think the takeaway here more than anything is that none of these schools are projected to show any degree of overcrowding inside of this decade. We'll have ample opportunity to reevaluate these zoning decisions 10 years from now and or consider building additional schools if warranted. We've planned for the future, but based off of this logical geographic plan, as well as these data-driven enrollment projections, this was our recommendation in 2 public meetings to the zoning committee, and ultimately this was the recommendation that was approved and is forwarded to the board here this evening. So that's the end of the content for Daybreak. We can talk about any questions you guys might have, or just maybe keep right on rolling into some of the rest of the slides. Thank you.
Trustee Smith.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. So I think that this is really smart. And the reason why I think that this is so smart, one, I'm not at all surprised it's coming out of the Zoning Advisory Committee. But what's so smart about this is that what this committee does, and what so many of our committees do, is learn from the best practices of what's been learned before. And what this plan does is it signals to all of these families moving here a clear matriculation plan. And we've seen that when communities have broken ground and then there's confusion. They might have picked a lot when it was zoned for one area, and then by the time their house is built or shortly thereafter it could be rezoned. This sends a very, very clear regional message to where their kids will be going to school, but it also sets on the record a second clear plan for how we will handle the growth in this area and the future planning, where the schools are master planned for, our openness to reviewing the student populations and building those schools at the right time. So I love the forward thinking of this, and I really, really appreciate the work. Thank you.
Trustee Mayberry.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Smith. You sort of crystallized my question, I think. All this is, much of this is in my district, District F, for fantastic.
Yes.
But, Christina, thank you, by the way, for your service. Yeah, so, and Mr. Searcy and I have spent a little time together. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. If this takes effect 2023-24, so it would be 2 years, right? Yeah. But there's still no development there. But to your point, this is forward thinking, right? That's why we're doing this, so we could sort of solidify these zones really for the long term, as opposed to sort of playing catch up and making adjustments every 3 or 4 years. Am I aligned with the right philosophy there?
Yep, 100%. Yep.
Clerk Minetto.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Thank you for this. This is amazing. And I just really especially like how on slide 13, on the, like, more than right half, there's no red. Thank you, because that's always been one of those things you go, red's not good in this situation. Thank you.
So to the red, I just want to be clear. I want you to help me make sure I understand it properly. 2023-24, Poliquetas will find some relief because of Rio Wrangler Elementary School. And then, yes.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's the linchpin. To be able to plan long-term and in conjunction with a master developer on this scale, really in many ways stems back to the passage of WC1 and our ability to actually respond in an appropriate way to overcrowding. The initiation of the construction of a new elementary school precipitating this next item really allows us the opportunity to create capacity to address the needs of many, many years to come of this development, and also position ourselves to be able to master plan another elementary school in the future decades should it be needed.
Okay. Thank you. Trustee Church.
Thank you. Number one, I appreciate everything the zoning committee did. It's the heavy lift. There's no way, I think, as a board, unless we brought sleeping bags, that we could listen to all that testimony that you listened to, digest it, and make decisions. So thank you very, very much. A couple comments. I did visit the Rio Wrangler site just the other day. I mean, they're already breaking ground. I mean, it's incredible to see what's coming along with that. So that's just awesome. And I like the plan, like you mentioned, the potential planning. It does offer a little flexibility. If for some reason I've seen many developments that are all approved and they never break ground. So there's a little bit of flexibility built into that. One comment and then one question. I just want people to know where we talk about Poloquitas being, say, 120% of capacity. We have modulars that we approved, and that math, even so the classrooms aren't overcrowded, I guess is what I'm saying. They're in modulars, which are not great, but they're okay. But that no matter how many modulars you build, the capacity doesn't change. Is that correct?
That's correct. The capacity, the additional temporary capacity that the modular or portable classrooms provide does not add to the base capacity of the school.
Great. So I don't want the public to think that our classrooms necessarily are overcrowded. If I remember right, we had a briefing, it's a military term, or a presentation, that we're expecting to see kind of a pop in K through 6 in the future. We're not seeing as many K through 6 coming in as going out, or K through 7. Is that correct? Can you refresh my memory?
I mean, there's a couple variables contributing to that. The POP term might have been mixed in with a bubble, enrollment bubble that's matriculating through our 9th, 10th, and 11th grades as we speak district-wide. That is illustrated to some degree in the high school projections, a little bit more than the elementary school projections, but we're also seeing other variables that are contributing to that, such as those decreasing student generation rates that I mentioned earlier. Again, every year we're updating those rates based on actual student generation numbers, and those have steadily declined for a long period of time. We've also presented to this board that I believe it was 2017 to 2020, the birth rate of Washoe County citizens per capita was the lowest birth rate per capita in the last 20 years. So birth rate, the number of children or students per capita, and then just this bubble, district-wide enrollment bubble matriculating out, does signal lower increases, less steep increases in overall enrollment.
Well said. Better than I could ever. Yeah, it's interesting, just fascinating demographics. But yeah, our population of students per 100,000 or whatever is less than many other growing communities. So that's an interesting demographic. But thank you very much. I think good job.
If I could add, Trustee Church, I think that it's really important that in these conversations about overcrowded schools, that we talk about the common spaces. It may not be that, it may be that there's enough classrooms at a school like, let's say, Poloquitas, for example, because that's the one in the red here. But I think we really need to, as a community, it's important for us to also realize that our students, especially in elementary school, where they learn the most is in the playground and in the libraries and in the common spaces. And when we have overcrowded schools, that means they have to have 4 or 5 lunch periods. That means that there's no extra spaces on the basketball court, especially right now at Poloquitas. Half of their brand new basketball courts are taken up by portables. So I think it's super important that, yes, we want to have enough classrooms, but portables are a temporary solution. And I have a son who has an IEP, and in some of our schools, our resource classes are actual classrooms, and that takes away from the classroom spaces for a full, say, 3rd grade class. So as a former teacher and as a parent who's lived through 2 different overcrowded schools with my children, I think it's really, really important that we're looking at the whole school and how our children in K through 5 are growing and developing, and those common spaces are actually some of the most important spaces that we have. So that's how I come to these these thoughts that as a committee, I think we talk about that a lot. And I think it's really, really important that we continue to plan forward. And I agree with Trustee Smith and Trustee Mayberry. I'm so glad that we're at a point where we actually get to plan ahead. This feels like a breath, right? Because we've been behind for so many years in our community, and it feels really good to have this opportunity to plan ahead. So I thank you all.
All right, if we're finished discussing 3.03, let's move on to 3.04. And just for my colleagues, I noticed that there's overlap in schools. And so I'm requesting that before we vote on 3.03, we look at 3.04. Thank you.
So this slide talks about our community outreach that we do. We do a considerable amount of outreach to ensure that we're getting the voice of the communities that are affected. We do Connect Ed messages through Blackboard Connect. We do social media postings in collaboration with our communications department, and we engage with public engagement. And for each meeting, we do new outreach. So for the meeting in November, we do outreach, then we repeat it again in January, we repeat again in February, and when we meet in April, we will outreach again to those areas. So parents and community members hear it multiple times.
Okay, so this item is really driven by the need or the active construction of the new elementary school off of Rio Wrangler Parkway. As Trustees Church mentioned, we have executed the construction contract and begun. I wanted to mention, I understand that the naming committee selected finalists for the school name should be coming to the board soon. We've tentatively got a groundbreaking ceremony scheduled. I believe April 15th is a Friday at like 11 a.m. Should be really wonderful. And it won't be too much longer before we even have a new principal. So part and parcel of all of that is establishing that enrollment zone so that all of these pieces can start to come together to really build that culture. This map here illustrates the existing boundary lines for, again, high school, middle, and elementary based on the different lines and whatnot. These enrollment boundaries were created in the 2019-2020 school year associated with the opening of Polakitas. Prior to that, prior to Polakitas opening, the enrollment boundaries were in place since the 13-14 school year. So while this has been an area of very aggressive change and growth throughout really the last 10 to 20 years, there was a lot of thought and discussion that went into the timing of these changes. Actually, an element of those board policies we referenced previously was that that children should not be rezoned twice within their career in elementary school. So, you know, it's a challenge to be rezoned once. It really should be avoided to be rezoned twice. And we were able to demonstrate that with this going into effect the 23-24 school year, coinciding with the new school opening, and also to give students and families over one full school year's notice to adapt or to, make decisions based on this change, that it won't actually affect any students that are being rezoned more than once in their elementary school career. So I just wanted to point that out. Next slide, please. We have the existing enrollment numbers. So the red, we've talked about before. That is why we're building a new elementary school. But I also wanted to just point out the numbers at the middle school level. DePoli and HERS are, there's plenty of capacity there, and they're relatively well balanced. So that was a point of discussion and concern throughout much of the zoning committee and public community discussions and deliberations, what those numbers look like, as well as at the high school level, less well balanced, but still through the end of the decade, no overcrowding exists at either of those schools. These numbers are reflective of the current existing enrollment boundaries. So then we'll dive into what we called our option one. This option was developed in 2018-2019 with the Zoning Advisory Committee at that time primarily focused on identifying the enrollment boundaries for the new Marcy Hers Middle School. And in order to do that, most of the area associated with Brown Elementary School, here on the screen kind of in light yellow, was rezoned from DePoli into Marcy Hers. And so in order to do that thoughtfully, we came up with a tentative enrollment boundary for this new elementary school, knowing that it was imminent, in the next several years. This dashed red line was our effort to say, hey, this is where we're likely to draw the boundary for the future Rio Wrangler area elementary school. And we moved the high school and middle school lines to be coincident with that elementary school line, so that if you look at this closely, you can see that a portion of the Brown Elementary School zone is currently in the DePoli zone, and another portion is in the Hers zone. That's what we talked about earlier as being known as a split feeder. So some of those kids, they go to elementary school at Brown together, and then when they go to middle school, they go to different middle schools. And that's challenging for families and students, and something that we've worked very, very hard district-wide to eliminate and had great success. When we established this enrollment zone in 1819 for Marcy Hers and essentially intentionally created a split feeder, it was always done with the knowledge that we would have an opportunity to come back and sort of address that with the opening of this new elementary school. So at any rate, that's the point I wanted to make on this slide. This was known as option 1. However, on the next slide, the updated enrollment projections associated with this particular enrollment boundary demonstrate that not enough overcrowding relief is achieved through option 1 to Poliquetas. So that's really where we started. Option 1 was what we talked about in 2018, 2019. However, updated enrollment projections are not adequate. So we moved on to option 2. We called this an expanded zone. You can see with option 1, it follows the same boundaries. That line, that curved line kind of in the middle, the north boundary is Steamboat Parkway. And so it follows on Steamboat Parkway just as option 1 did, but where option 1 went south down Rio Wrangler Parkway and then behind DeMonte Ranch High School, instead this option goes north up Rio Wrangler Parkway and then cuts eastward into the hills in between two subdivisions. That is a major drainage way. Those roads don't connect physically, and so it was a logical geographic opportunity for us to draw a different boundary line for consideration. The southern boundary line doesn't change versus option 1. It just captures all of those communities kind of to the north and east of DeMonte Ranch High School. So on the next slide, you can see the enrollment projections associated with it. And as expected, the enrollment for Poliquetas is decreased because we're taking more neighborhoods and moving them from Poliquetas into the new elementary school in this option. So this was presented from the very first meeting, kind of option 1, option 2, this being our quote-unquote staff recommendation to the committee that, hey, look, it well balances all of these zones. Yes, there's, Poliquetas in the latter years nearing 90% of capacity. It honors that original southern boundary with option 1 and the middle school boundary, but this we think is our staff recommendation. And really this is where the process took hold. If you flip to the next slide, the community asked a lot of questions. They provided a lot of input. The committee asked a lot of questions and provided a lot of input. As is often the case with the Zoning Advisory Committee, it generated a lot of good additional analysis for staff to consider. So this graphic was presented last month to the Zoning Advisory Committee, trying to help everyone identify, in this case, 6 different areas. There were actually 9 different areas that were analyzed and presented in the last meeting, But this is how the process really works. You know, they say, well, what about this area and what about that area, and can you move this here and can you move that there? And these are all totally valid questions, and ultimately, as you'll see on the next couple of slides, resulted in a recommendation other than what we originally proposed, in large part due to the public input and the engagement and the additional analysis that went into all of this. So I mentioned there's 6 pocket areas here. The 7th, 8th, and 9th areas were illustrated in our meetings. They were really associated with what we call the west of Veterans areas. So you've got Veterans Parkway kind of meandering north and south through here. You've got that blue vertical line on a major drainage way separating Polakitas from Double Diamond currently. We looked at a couple different scenarios where we took pockets of those neighborhoods where we could break it apart logically and what the enrollment numbers associated with those changes would be as well. For the most case, they were either problematic from an enrollment standpoint, like there were too many students in this area to move from one school to another. It would just move the overcrowding, or it was geographically illogical or inefficient. You know, for transportation or other reasons, it really just didn't make good sense. So we focused on these 6 areas, broke it down. There's over 1,000 possible permutations of this combination of scenarios. We boiled it down essentially to 9 different ones, 6 counting the first 2 and 1 with 3 different options that we felt either were important to illustrate that, you know, maybe they weren't as plausible as some might have hoped, you know, because they were logical, good suggestions, but when we actually applied the numbers to it, in fact, they didn't quite accomplish our objectives, or in other cases because they were actually some of the best options, as we'll see in option 6. So, diving forward, this is just a reset, right? This is our existing boundaries, just to reorient yourself. And then we fast forwarded for the board through all of the 8 other options. We saw option 1 and option 2. There were a number of other options that we presented to the board. And of course, we broke them all down with that previous slide so people can kind of do their own mental math and add area E and subtract area C, etc. But really, where the committee landed was this option 6. And what option 6 consists of essentially is the option 2, okay, which was our expanded option 1. If you go back 2 slides, that area outlined original attendance zone. That's option 1. Option 2 takes area F into the original attendance zone. That was option 2. Option 6 is option 2, so it's this original attendance zone plus F, and then it adds in C and D and subtracts out B. So what it looks like when all that, all right. This area right here, minus B plus C, D, and F. That's how you get to the map that's illustrated 2 slides ahead of us, whatever number that is. So you can get your bearings again. You see B notched out from the bottom. You see C and D added into the new school zone at the top. And you see F above, so to speak, DeMonte Ranch High School added in there. Lots of discussion went into that. With B, we're moving the middle and the high school boundaries as well. There was some reluctance to do that, but it was very clear that everyone agreed that that elementary, middle, and high school vertical alignment needed to remain intact. So if we were going to take B and keep them in Brown, that they had to stay in HERS and Galena, or be rezoned to HERS Galena. A lot of discussion about A for that matter. One of the options that we didn't show you illustrated that A was just too populous to stay in Brown, that it would not sufficiently relieve the overcrowding in Brown. So A is moving to the new elementary school here in this option. Areas C and D are on the other side of Steamboat Parkway. That was another area of significant discussion from transportation standpoint, safe routes to school standpoint, total student enrollment standpoint, etc. Lots of discussion there. And then, of course, areas E and F were also hotly debated for all the pros and cons that moving those schools or not moving those neighborhoods into different schools would result in. Ultimately, this option 6 was the recommendation of the committee. You can see why in many ways on the next slide. Despite some of the considerations that I just mentioned, crossing this area, rezoning middle and high, et cetera, this slide illustrates the projected enrollments for option 2, which was the original staff recommendation, and the next slide is the numbers for option 6. So noteworthy, some of the underutilization, or however you want to characterize it, at Brown. This option shows a few more students staying in Brown, really nice numbers at Brown throughout the rest of the decade. No change to Double Diamond. Polakitas goes down a little bit. So you saw that yellow out there, 10 years, over 90%, cools them off just a little bit. Rio Wrangler's actually even. I wanted to point that out. It's not an error. C and D, coincidentally, are almost exactly equal to Area B. So when you actually do that math, subtract B, add C and D back in, you get the same numbers for Rio Wrangler. That's not a mistake. And then just again to mention that DePauli and HERS are relatively unaffected by this small change, but they're very well balanced. And again, the punchline here is that there is no overcrowding in any of these schools well through the end of this decade with this option. I can't say enough to the committee and the community who participated in this process. I've been a part of the zoning committee for a lot of years. This is very typical. This is an emotional change event, and I can say, as somebody who helps develop these recommendations and analyzes the pros and cons and tries to bring forward the best recommendations, that it's actually the norm rather than the exception to have the process play out and have it result in a different outcome than was originally proposed, and almost always, as is demonstrated here, for the better. So I do want to provide that feedback regarding the process, while absolutely respecting the disruptive nature of this change, the thoughtful, inclusive way that we tried to do it, and the diligent way that we crunch these numbers and make our projections with every good faith effort is really what's demonstrated here with this recommendation. So that's the end of our content. We wrote out the recommendations for you. They're kind of a mouthful and you got to name them all out. But they're both on the table now, and we'd be happy to discuss this or anything back on Daybreak if you'd like. Thank you.
Trustee Smith.
Thank you, Vice President Nicolette. Okay, one quick point of clarification. The option that is really in front of the board is on slide 28, right? Because they both say option 6, but this is really the one. Okay. So here's my question, and this is also a mea culpa, because as much as we like to look in our crystal ball, sometimes unexpected things happen. And the unexpected thing that I'm referring to here was the huge growth in this area. So we did the initial zoning for Polagitas as the best we could, and then we saw the families move. And we know that there's still a lot of families moving there. So the question that I have is, can you walk us through any unique approaches that you took in this area, knowing that we saw a different outcome than what we had originally projected? So based on the growth in this area, we know that there's been some unusually high patterns in terms of families moving to the area. So how was that built into the feedback process and the projections?
I would suggest in two different ways. Number one is the annually updated, empirically based student generation rates. So, we see these numbers, we've seen these numbers for several years. Every year, a 3-year trailing pattern is analyzed and applied to updated student generation rates. So we have real-time, actual data informing our projections going forward. I won't talk about so much the development enrollment projections, but I guess I'll stop there as far as how our projections are generated, because we've talked about that. We've talked about adding some sort of a new school attraction factor coefficient to our projections. And we've declined to use that because it impairs kind of the validity of our projections. As much as they absolutely are projections of human behavior that are, as difficult to predict as pandemics are arguably, right? We didn't want to throw personal opinion or anecdotes or anything other than actual data or defendable projections into the mix. Where I think some of the other variables come into play is really in the process. When we brought forward a projection that we thought was, mathematically sound, that showed Polychaetus even at 90%, I think a lot of people on the committee and in the community voiced their trepidation with that option. Goodness, I want to make sure there's enough space in Polychaetus for the future. What if we're projecting low despite our best ability or efforts to project? What if it still comes in higher? Is there another option that would actually give us a little more room in Polychaetus? That takes place in the process part of it, or at the committee level. What we do with the numbers is, by the book, so it's not subjective.
Thank you very much.
Christine Hull, for the record, I would like to add that one of the things that happened when we had all this community feedback was the conversation about pulling some of the previously zoned kids that were going to go to Rio Wrangler, that original zone, back into Brown. And that actually came out of all those community conversations. And the committee really looked at, what if we did give Rio Wrangler and Polychaetus, I know that's not Rio, it's not really called Rio Wrangler, sorry, but the school on Rio Wrangler Parkway, what if we gave them a little more space when it did look like Brown was actually going to have more than we had originally anticipated? And that's where that option B came from, was entirely out of those experiences with opening Polychaetus and Sky Ranch and all of the schools. When we started, we were like, whoa, there's more than we expected, right? So I believe that the community engagement that we did helped us to come to these conclusions, to give a little bit more room than we had originally looked at. Yeah.
Thank you so much for explaining that.
All right, we'll go to Clerk Minetto, and then President Taylor, and then Trustee Mayberry.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice President. So this is creating the single feeder thing. Just tell me that again. Thank you.
Yes. So one of the hard decisions about changing that area B was then that would change those families to now attend Marcy Hers and Galena. So we really thought about that a lot, because it wasn't just changing our elementary school boundary lines, it was also creating another neighborhood to go to, Galena and Marcy Hers. And we did spend a lot of time making sure that we spoke to not only the principal, the PTA, and several family members. We got a lot of feedback from that community, and that particular area, they gave us a lot of great feedback, and there's walking paths, and they felt very strongly, and we very clearly asked them about the middle school and high school changes, and they were okay with that. But the rest of the changes will not impact the middle school and high school, because all of that zone, so the new Rio Wrangler area, Polychaetus, Double Diamond, they all go to DePoli and Damani.
Oh, okay.
So that will not change that. Only that area B, which is 50-ish elementary school students, and thank you, and 19 middle school and 25 high school, which is on the slide with the alphabet. That one. Yes. So there will be no more split feeders in South Reno.
All right, thank you. President Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, and thank you for your work. This is because the area is growing so fast, and zoning itself is always a challenge. And I've really respected the work of the zoning committee, of Adam, you and Lauren, staffing the committee. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Trustee Smith was the former chair of the zoning committee, and really really opened the work of having the community engagement and the community conversations, and as Adam said earlier, really shifting to really where, hey, the community is saying this, we should make some changes based upon that. So I just continue to be grateful for that work. I just wanted to go back a little bit, just kind of, I guess, connects to what Trustee Smith said a little bit. You know, we were off the mark a little bit because of some of the things that you mentioned in the new school attraction and so on with Polikitis, in particular because it's in that area. And in opening, and already we have temporary units out there, and so on. So you feel comfortable? This is probably for you, Adam. Do you feel comfortable with the shifts that the adjustments you were able to make? I like the idea of, well, let's give a little bit more room because we had more kids before there. Do you feel comfortable that to the extent possible, we know we can't predict who's really going to have babies, right? And all of that, right? But to the extent possible, do you feel comfortable that we're a little better positioned as we look at opening the real Wrangler School from the things that we learned about Polikitis?
I do. Yeah. You know, I mean, a good bit has changed since 2017, 2018, when we made those boundaries. You know, it's human behavior, so there's always a variability or a factor of unknown, but I know how hard the staff works into acquiring the best data and analyzing it as thoroughly as possible, learning and including that into our new projections, and I feel as confident as ever with these projections.
Okay. Were you able to incorporate some of the learnings from that in terms of that with Polikitis to the extent that we can, so that hopefully we don't open and already find ourselves in an overcrowded situation?
No, absolutely. You know, as I mentioned earlier, every year we're taking updated information and incorporating it into our projections and updating our projections, learning every year where we missed the mark and why to the best of our ability, and trying to update our projections. So for that and other reasons, I remain very confident in our projections and that the decision from the committee will actually prove out as it's demonstrated here in these projections.
No, I appreciate that. And please don't hear me saying that, you know, hey, you know, we just wrong all the time and so on, because you aren't, right? You aren't. I mean, the incredible job of looking ahead and projecting who's going to actually show up, who isn't going to get a variance, who is, and all of those things is complicated at best. And so the work that you and the team, Randy, all of them do is fantastic. Just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that one because I got some community questions about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President. Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. A question for you, just going back to the maps, just one area that gives me pause, looking at the original attendance zone, areas C and D. Are those areas now zoned for the new Rio Wrangler High School? Am I seeing that correctly?
That's correct. They're being proposed. They're currently zoned for Polikitis, and they're being proposed to be zoned to the new elementary school.
Will those students be bused to Rio Wrangler?
Some will be within the walk zone, and some will be outside of the current walk zone.
I'm just worried about that intersection. I'm worried about that intersection, Steamboat and Veterans Parkway. Was that a topic of conversation at all?
It was very much a topic of the conversation. You know, there's excellent pathways. There's a pedestrian flasher beacon across Steamboat Parkway adjacent from Area C, and then there's a signalized intersection at Steamboat and Veterans. So for the neighborhood, the residences within the walk zone in Area C would not be provided transportation.
It looked pretty close. I didn't think it would be. That's worries me a little bit. Okay. I did reach out to all the principals, and all the principals were, at least the ones that got back to me, were very supportive of the changes. I don't think we've gotten a lot of public comment on this, with maybe one exception. So thank you for that. I haven't been out to that intersection recently, but you know, to the extent that we can continue to be mindful of the traffic and if we need to work with any of the necessary agencies to put the right devices and traffic calming equipment there to ensure the traffic is slow and that the children are safe. Our children are safe when they walk across the street. That would give me some comfort, because that does worry me.
I appreciate you bringing that up. It definitely was a topic of conversation. Talking about the agencies, a lot of collaboration with the Washoe RTC and the City of Reno on this. There is a large overhead pedestrian flasher being installed by the RTC right across from Area C, and that there's a large park across the street from Area C. As well as, I wanted to mention, in conjunction with the school construction project, we'll be installing some pedestrian flashers on existing crosswalks and likely a school speed zone on Rio Wrangler Parkway as well. Even though the school isn't adjacent to Rio Wrangler Parkway, we're making some off-site safety improvements on Rio Wrangler as well.
And thank you for the reminder, Trustee Mayberry. Remember to check your email because there are public comments. All right, Trustee Church.
Thank you very much. Number one, recognizing we do the best we can with predicting the future with our crystal balls. I kind of go along with President Taylor that we can be wrong. And I point out we predicted enrollment would increase, just going back to 2016, at 1.7%, turned out to be 0.5. I'm looking at a graph. Our enrollment is less now than it was in 2014. So, but recognizing that it's going to this big neighborhood, that the demographics are shifting. So I'm not criticizing any of that. I'm just pointing out, you never know. You never know what's going to happen. That said, the one thing that encourages me too, my understanding is nothing stops a parent, and correct me if I'm wrong, perhaps the superintendent, but nothing stops a parent from requesting a variance. So if this just doesn't work for their plan, and I've seen cases like custodial, where you share custody of a child, so they're at one house and then they're at the other house, or where the person that delivers the child works is more convenient than where they live. My understanding is they can always request a variance, and especially because we're under capacity.
They can request a variance from their school that they would be requesting that from, and then that's also reciprocal upon the other one. But the important thing is that we would not be providing transportation.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, and if I may, thank you, Madam Vice President. To go back to Trustee Mayberry's point around traffic, I would imagine that as the school that will soon be named on Rio Wrangler, that as soon as that school is constructed, most likely Safe Routes to School will be working in conjunction with the community and the principal to help carve out paths for walking school buses and those types of things. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. And there, it's really creating that awareness. I forget all the acronyms, right? They have some handy 5 L's with Safe Routes to School, but creating that sense of community and reaching out to the families that live in those neighborhoods and developing habits to help train those families and those students on how to walk through that intersection crosswalk safely. Things like that is all a part of what we do at our schools, as well as establishing these zoning boundaries.
Thank you.
It appears our discussion is closed, and I'd like to call for public comment, please.
So this is for 303.
Thank you.
Pablo Nava Duran.
This is for, do we talk about downstream, like daybreak area?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so for the daybreak area, so I'm going to say that this zoning committee have a small plan to have we modify for the rezoning situation because they're barely a Taylor Valley development in 2022, and they have not set up a house till 2023. So the family should move in here by fall of 2023. We want to make sure it's ready, and then we have to modify for the school, and then we think a long-term plan for the future. And we do know the Wiener Poglo, the belly around the Don Spring, the rezoning from Hidden Valley to Don Spring does make sense for the community. I will approve that. And for Angela Curry, it's a little bit isolated because they have to roll all the way to the mountain through the Rattlesnake Mountain, all the way to McCarran, and go drive to McCarran, go to Wiener Poglo, and that's it. And we might rely on taking on the bus for Senator Curley. So up to school plantations, and then for the town center, and between town center and Senator Curley, that's the shopping center. So good plan. Good plan. Thank you for finding the zoning building, all kind of stuff. And it does make sense to go to Double Diamond because Double Diamond was a little bit under-utilized. It does make sense to go Double Diamond. And Poly is next to the Poly. Next to the street is the Poly Middle School, South Meadow. Makes sense. And then for other side of Venture Parkway, there was a network going to go to Polokias. That makes sense because if someone goes to Polokias, but some are that they could rezone to Hidden Valley because Hidden Valley is very under-utilized. I think it makes sense to go Polokias. I do support going to Polokias because we have a labor short, a bus driver shortage, so we want to stay at Polokias. While we're here, town center, I do support going stay in Poly Middle School and then going to Double Diamond Middle School. We agree, and we might make a man to make the bus, but for downstream of Pines, so we want to make a balance. So I will give the proof to that zoning advisor committee for that map. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duran. I learned a lot. Thank you. You're amazing. I mean that.
Andrea Thompson.
And is this for 303 or 304 or both?
303.
Speak quickly to 303 and then do separately for 304. Is that okay?
Sure. Yes, thank you. Come on up. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. As someone who also sits on an appointed committee, you guys are all amazing for doing all of this. I know there's no good solution for everyone. I do live in the South Reno area, and I just want to speak specifically to the Daybreak area. I'm concerned that we're not thinking as far ahead as far as how crowded Pulakitas may be as they absorb some of these communities. As you can see from the Daybreak area, those that are going to be east of Veterans Parkway will automatically and logically be absorbed by Pulakitas. As a parent who has a child at Pulakitas, we've had, several portables, which are a great temporary solution. My concern, unfortunately, in today's America is safety. I would prefer, certainly, that all of our students be inside the walls of the school. And so I want, as we think of this forward thinking, I'm concerned that we're still not giving Pulakitas enough leeway to absorb some of those things, especially with Daybreak being built. And then also, if you look back at the other ones behind my house, which is up in the hills, they've started putting, waterways and pole lines, telephone lines. So, and it's owned by a developer. So I'm concerned that logically, no matter where, if they keep building back there, they're going to go to Pulakitas. And so my concern is that maybe even we have to think forward and say, are we really giving Pulakitas enough leeway with knowing that Daybreak is likely coming and Pulakitas is going to have to take those even if they build a new elementary school, given that Veterans Parkway is a major highway where people go, 50 to 60 miles an hour. So I'll speak to 3.04 separately, but thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for 3.03.
All right, moving on to 3.04. You're up again.
Jessica Wardala.
You're warmed up. Perfect timing.
I'll give her a break. All right.
Did you fill out a public comment card?
I did.
All right, thank you.
All right. So good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us to speak regarding Pulakitas and what we're calling Rio Wrangler. Myself and others in my neighborhood either emailed or went to the last two zoning meetings, and we still feel like our concerns about the traffic in the area are not being met. Something that Mr. Searcy here had mentioned at the last meeting when I addressed so for context, I live in Area F. We contend with Kids Life, and that is a very small street. We basically only have one exit, maybe two out of our neighborhood, making Pulikitas a very logical school for us to go to because we're turning right out of there, and it makes the traffic once Rio Wrangler extends to South Meadows Parkway, it makes it a very easy road for us to take instead of turning left and dealing with the Kids Life traffic and Doral. This is something that came up when Doral was being proposed to go on Desert Way. There's basically no room to extend that area. So with the wetlands and all of that, Adam had mentioned that if we were worried about turning left out of Yeehaw, that we could simply go up our neighborhood and go onto Western Skies. That poses a problem because that street right there says no outlet, so we can't exactly go up. I had suggested that Area F be split into two areas. There are pathways that divide us. It wouldn't be, neighbors going to different schools. We are very distinctly divided. They are not done being built. We are very well established. We've been there since 2014 and earlier than that. So we would like to be divided. And then something that was not mentioned at any of the zoning meetings that I have seen was the 95 single family units that are going in front of what we're calling Rio Wrangler. Those projections were not on there, and if those are single-family units, how many kids are going to be there going to the new school? And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pablo Nava Duran.
I'm gonna say that the option one for the Rio Wrangler, that is a original plan coming back from 5 years ago, or 2018, 2019 school year. I don't know how many years, so don't give me one. If you give me one, let me know. So for 2019, we did split Brown to Fair School, go to middle school and high school. And for middle school, high school, actually, and we created Poor Kids Elementary School. And then right now, 5 years later, it's 2017 to 2018, so I'm going to 4 years later, now Poor Kids was overcrowded, and now we need to relieve overcrowded for Poor Kids to make a new elementary school for Wrangler. And then option one seemed like this is a 4 year ago plan for the family, our future zone for Wrangler elementary school. And then it's not a case for option one. As a result, the number changes, and Poor Kids is not still overcrowded yet. So option two, that is stand a line to F, including F, to go all F to go to Poor Kids elementary school. That will balance the woman and give us staff recommendations. And then for the option 6 and B, that the parents or community recommend is to option A. I think option A should go to Wrangler and stay Popoli and the Monty Ranch High School. And then option B, you create like an island to go to Sarah Brown and then have to rezone to Hearst and Galen High School to create an additional bus for the student who live in here. And we don't have a available bus driver and available. That's really concern about option B for the bus vegetation. And for CSD, I don't like the movie to Wrangler because you cross the street one way or another, and that require to go on take the bus to go to Wrangler. And there is a walk zone for Poor Kids for CSD to go to remaining for Poor Kids in elementary school. For E, I'm gonna stay in Poor Kids, and for F, I'm not sure for family if they want to split. I recommend like maybe you want to if this one will mostly improve that, but additional for give additional for option F to come back. So if your decision to come, so good luck with that, and it's not a very easy decision. So
Thank you, Mr. Duran.
Andrea Thompson.
Hello, thanks for having me back. So I wanted to dive in really quick to the data. So that was my concern, is that we're not necessarily doing enough to take away from Pulikitis, and that we're going to end up rezoning again in 3 to 5 years. And so something that I brought to the committee several times was, why are we still underutilizing Double Diamond? You know, when I look back at the projections from 2018, and I know that we can't have a crystal ball, but Double Diamond was projected to have 90% capacity. Pulikitis at 97. So we were off by upwards of anywhere between 20 and 40%. So that tells me that unfortunately the data is really not that great, and we can't just rely on the data. So as someone who lives in that neighborhood and knows how many families are moving there, they're not even done with all the construction around Pulikitis, which are very much family homes that have several children. I'm still concerned that we're not utilizing Double Diamond. So I urged the committee to say, how can we thoughtfully utilize Double Diamond to not be at 75%, maybe be in the 80s or 90s, because they've had empty classrooms while my kids are in a portable at Pulikitis, right? And unfortunately, they've looked at lots of the data. There is a contentious neighborhood, typically like around Cyan neighborhood. It's a lot of kids, and so they're concerned about, is it going to add too much to Double Diamond? I would say that if we looked at the projections of the numbers that they got underutilized at Double Diamond and overutilized at Pulikitis, that likely adding some kids to Double Diamond could alleviate some of that for Pulikitis. So I've urged the committee to do that, and unfortunately, it hasn't really been well received. We did have the chair come to our PTO meeting, which was really great, to let us know, like, hey, we're coming, can you give us information? And I asked, hey, why is Veterans Parkway not really a dividing line? It makes more sense to me. Can you tell me more about it? And unfortunately, the response was, well, that's not something I would vote for because I live in that neighborhood. And my concern is that I really just don't want to be back here 3 to 5 years from now saying we're going to uproot more kids, and my kids not even planned to be rezoned at this point. And I'm just worried that we're going to be overcrowded at Pulikitis, and we need to be more thoughtful about how we're utilizing Double Diamond, which is essentially developmentally locked, right? There's no new developments going in that's going to impact Double Diamond, and I want to make sure that we're making decisions that make sense as a community. And really just saying, okay, we didn't get it right the first time, so how can we really fix this, rather than saying, well, we're just going to hope we get it right again this time. So I really hope that you guys at this point will send it maybe back to the committee to think thoughtfully about that, or maybe have your own perception of what could be better, how can we utilize Double Diamond, how can we make sure that we're planning ahead, because I really want to make sure, as someone who plans to live in this community, I have very young children who will be in elementary school for many years, for a while, and I want to make sure that this is thoughtful now, so that we're not making these decisions again and saying, oh my gosh, we've messed up and now we have to move more students. And I just want to make sure that we are being very thoughtful about how we utilize Double Diamond, and the committee to consider that. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
The board received an email from Jennifer Freeman.
Thank you, JJ. Trustee Smith.
2 quick points of clarification. One, can you confirm, yes or no, that all the projected developments are built into these numbers, including any of the areas right around the elementary school?
Yes.
Question 2, how many zoning advisory committee meetings did this topic come to? Of that whole list, how many of them had this added? So item 3.03 or 0.4?
The rezoning associated with the new Rio Wrangler area elementary school was heard and agendized in 3 separate public zoning advisory committee meetings.
Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. Mr. Searcy, can you help address that the issue of that was one of the speakers brought up on the single turn and crossing over lane of traffic? I know there was some discussion on that, and I'm not sure if that could be mitigated or not.
Yeah, I'll do my best to try to address that. This was Area F, if you guys recall, if you're familiar with that area, this Life Church, sort of to the north and east of the Damani Ranch area. We talked about it in terms of Area F in this presentation. So a lot of feedback from the community there. We looked at options to keep Area F in Polakitas, keep Area E in Polakitas, move both areas E and F into Rio Wrangler. Ultimately, this option 6 that was recommended by the committee has Area E staying in Polakitas, Area F moving into the new elementary school. The original option 1 is a good example of where E and F specifically, stays in Polakitas, and as we saw originally, that projection has Polakitas remaining in an overcrowded state. So as far as those left-hand turns, I have talked to the Washoe RTC about this repeatedly, this Macaulay Ranch Road and this Yeehaw Way or Yeehaw Road. It's an uncontrolled intersection, meaning like there's no stop sign going north-south on Rio Wrangler Parkway. So I think at peak times when the high school's opening in the morning and that road is uniquely busy, often either associated with the high school or occasionally with the church or the pre-K facility there, it can be difficult to find a break in traffic and turn left out there. I don't live there, but we did hear that repeatedly and extensively. It was very genuinely considered by the committee, and ultimately the Area 6 recommends that the option 6 includes Area F being rezoned to the Rio Wrangler Elementary School.
Trustee Smith?
And just to carry on to that, this is one of those areas that I recognize are outside of our control. We should very much consider it. But, it's the feedback about would they put a light there? That's really outside the purview of this board and the decision related to what makes sense from a zoning standpoint, and then making sure that we work with our community and regional partners to understand the impacts of all of this. But, we would have to make zoning decisions based on this and then work with our area partners on the implications of roads, use, things like that.
President Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. I will just a couple of questions from me as well. One of the public commenters, and it's I'm sure as you looked from a zoning committee, I mean, the job you do is usually pretty thorough, and as I said before, I appreciate that. Can you talk a little bit to the benefits or the consideration of such as suggested splitting Area F? I think I know the response to it myself, but I'd like to hear the thinking, because I believe that's something the zoning committee considered, according to our public commenter, that was mentioned at the zoning committee meeting, and that was some conversation. I know that part of and you mentioned this earlier, Mr. Searcy, that part of it is keeping neighborhoods together, but can you just talk a little bit about that, if you'll recall?
So what I was just describing as far as Area E and Area F having been considered in multiple different combinations, stay in Polakitas, move to the new zone, a scenario where Area F was further divided was not analyzed or presented to the community. It was discussed, actively discussed, not only presented under public comment, but discussed by the committee members, and ultimately a clear opinion was made by the committee members that we didn't want to dive deeper into that sort of dissection of neighborhoods. That neighborhood may well have developed over fits and starts over through the recession and over the last 10 plus years. So while individual communities might feel a connection to one another that the maps and the roadway networks maybe don't illustrate, there's not a logical break in between those subdivisions, and so that was not presented, and the committee never requested it.
Okay, but it sounds like that's something the committee discussed, but didn't go deeper on it because it didn't merit that based upon the discussion and where the committee landed.
It was definitely brought to the attention of the committee through public comment and their own deliberation, and that's where it was left.
Okay. My second question then is, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I know the recommendation from the committee is option 6, yes?
That's correct.
Okay, when you're on Zoom, you don't see it, and I'm used to having more screens in front of me. I've got this window laptop, and so I'm opening and closing and so on. So thank you. Wanted to make sure of that because from what I see, please help me to make sure I'm seeing this correctly. As we look at option 6, which is the recommendation, and I'm really the consideration of are we fully utilizing the schools? Which is obviously part of what we want to do as a board, as a district. I know the zoning committee. That's part of your consideration as well. When we get to the year 23-24 and move forward, it appears as though the utilization of both elementary schools, Double Diamond and Poliquetas, they look fairly even, but between 5-6% or so until you get way down the line. Am I reading that correctly?
You are. I appreciate the opportunity to comment on this. I think it's noteworthy that Double Diamond Elementary School in option 6 is projected to have the largest enrollment of any of these elementary schools, both in the first year, 23-24, and in the 10-year projection, 31-32. The most number of students of any of these elementary schools will be at Double Diamond Elementary School. The schools are not identical, so their maximum enrollment levels are different. The utilization percentages vary slightly. But given all these other variables, geographic boundaries, this isn't just something you can divide up precisely evenly. These numbers all plus or minus 4% of 80% utilization across all 4 elementary schools in 23-4 is tremendously well balanced and similarly reasonably well balanced in those outer years. So you are seeing that right. Those are the numbers associated with Area 6. I appreciated the comment earlier from Trustee Smith about recognizing that this second slide reflects area or option 6. This includes not only area C, D, and F, and then without B, that it's assumed here that it also includes kind of the base numbers. So areas that weren't actually given a letter, so to speak. It includes A, things like that. So it could be a little misleading from this title. It's almost better to flip between that slide and the previous slide and look at the map, see all the areas that either were or are currently zoned for Brown or are currently zoned for Poliquetas, not just C, D, and F, but also a whole bunch of other neighborhoods that constitute how we arrive at these numbers on the final slide.
Okay. I wanted to just make sure I followed that I was reading that clearly because it looked like the distribution was a little more equal. That cleared that up for me. Thank you.
Thank you, President Taylor. Trustee Smith.
I know, I'm so active. All right, I'm going to make a motion and take one off the board. So for 303, because these have to be taken individually, right? Yes. Okay. So we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to go ahead and make a motion for item 3.03, which was that first part of the presentation. So I move to approve the school enrollment boundary adjustments to the following schools as presented by the Zoning Advisory Committee, effective the 22-24 school year, and that's Double Diamond Elementary, Nick Poliquetas Elementary, Donner Springs Elementary, Hidden Valley Elementary, Edward Pine Middle, Kendall DePoli Middle, Earl Wooster High, and Damani Ranch High School.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Trustee Mayberry. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposition? None. Motion passes 7-0. Sorry, Trustee Taylor, I was a little fast on that, but we heard you.
Okay. I should just do a thumbs up or something. I see you, Trustee Church. Thanks for the hint. I'm going to use that.
All right, that passes. 3.03, 7-0. Next, 3.04. Do I have a motion? We've had spirited discussion and input. Trustee Mayberry.
Yeah, I'll make the motion, but I want to preface it with a comment. I know that, that these zoning issues are emotional. I mean, I've been through that myself. And not everybody's going to be happy. I think we know that's the case. But I think it's important that everybody's heard. And I do think, once we rezone, I just as one trustee, we own that. So I don't think we should just dismiss it and not continue to be engaged, mitigating, working with our regional partners, adding, we can discuss traffic calming, traffic signals, or whatever the case may be. I hope that's what we do. Mr. Searcy, I mean, can you comment on that at all? In terms of the partnerships we have with our regional partners in RTC, NDOT, I just want to make sure that if we do this, that we don't just disregard any impediments down the road, and that we continue to work regionally to find fixes.
100%. I have no problem echoing that and carrying that forward myself. I actually have a transportation engineering background. I have a lot of relationships with City of Reno and Washoe RTC, professional relationships. And I also feel equally as passionately about this student, pedestrian, multimodal safety. I've had many conversations and meetings even throughout this process with some of my peers, stemming from the feedback we've gotten from the public on some of these changes. So it's very important to me. It's something that I'm well positioned to champion, and I absolutely will do so.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody's help. I'll go ahead and make a motion. May I? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
President Taylor.
Thank you so much. Just to jump in, before you make the motion, Trustee Mayberry, thank you, Madam Vice President. Perhaps this is something we can ask the superintendent to put on the radar of our safe routes to school. I know it's going to be down the line, but because we have MJ, we have that area that's one of the things that they look at is safe routes. If we can just ask it just be put on their radar so that once the school is built, then we know that we're looking at this internally as well as externally. That might just give another layer of paying attention to it, because we all know we want it to be safe. So just a suggestion that maybe you can make that as part of your motion, or if that's all the direction you need, Madam Superintendent, if the board so desires.
Thank you, President Taylor. I think that's an excellent recommendation, and I truly believe that will be followed up on. All right, Adam. Trustee Mayberry.
Was that Andrew?
Oh, get out of here.
She called me Andrew earlier. It was Adam Mayberry, Mayberry, Andy Mayberry. So I'm not going to amend the motion, because you have your marching orders, right? Thank you,
sir.
Thank you, Superintendent McNeil. So I will move to the Board of Trustees approve the recommendation from the Zoning Advisory Committee to modify the zoning boundaries at Brown Elementary School, Nick Polakaitis Elementary School. I didn't say that right. I hate that. Polakaitis. I'm so sorry. I just have a hard time with that. Nick Polakaitis Elementary School, Kendall DePauli Middle School, Marcy Hurst Middle School, DeMonte Ranch High School, and Galena High School in the manner depicted as option 6, effective for the 2023-24 school year.
Trustee Rodriguez with a second. Any discussion? All right. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you for your mind-bending work. This is tough stuff. All right. Congratulations. You guys have been very kind to me, by the way. All right. Next public comment. Last public comment? No? No. No. Board reports. Oh, do we have to? Sorry. Sorry. I'm so sorry. Oh, you guys are so important. All right, here we go. 4.01, board reports. Trustee Church, please begin.
Thank you.
I want to poke a little fun at my friends in New Mexico. I love New Mexico, but a recent study came out that as of a few years ago, Nevada was last in education for Ed Week. Now, I point out Nevada, not the school district here. And this year, New Mexico took the prize. So I don't know where to send the trophy for last place to New Mexico, but if anybody is listening, let me know where to send the last place trophy to you for taking that from us, because they had made fun of us on the front page of their newspaper previously. So just wanted to poke a little fun there at my friends in New Mexico. I want to bring up RTC 5. That's a gas tax. It's going to go up so untimely, going to go up on the 1st of July. Why is that important to the school district? I don't think we pay that tax at the school district, but all of our staff does. They have to drive here. They have to drive around. And that gas tax, it's just got to be a non-starter. And the county commission has the authority, as I'm told by the LCB, to stop that. Also, S1 and S2 are two gaming measures that are supposed to be on the ballot. I just want, regardless of what others do, I'm opposed to that. 10% sales tax in Washoe County is unacceptable. And the gaming tax, we lost Harrah's. Who knows who's next? Vegas lost a number of casinos. It's just not a good time for a never-ending tax. If anybody happens to drive by the GSR, and I'm not advocating any business, but they're having an RV sale. And the reason I bring it up is not because you can go buy an RV, but because if you tour, for my fellow trustees, some of these modern trailers, RVs, they're incredibly big, incredibly fancy, and that could be one of the issues that we address in terms of staff housing. So just look at those. That's all I ask. Just go to any RV place, doesn't matter which one, and just look inside those big RVs, because that could be one of the approaches that we take on the staff housing puzzle. I got a few minutes left. The newspaper had an article, and Reno Gazette, if you're listening, I'm begging for a fact check that stated we were at, and others have stated this, we were at the bottom, the absolute bottom, for pure, don't make me say it twice, per pupil spending. That's absolutely not true. We're not doing great. We're around 42 to 45th, but as far as I've done research, and I did it extensively, we are not last. Utah is probably one of the ones that comes up last, even though they outperform us in many ways. But if anybody's going to say that we're last in per pupil spending, then be prepared to back that up, because I've got stats that say that's not true. And in my 9 seconds left, I'll just say thank you very much. And wearing my apparel for the support of Ukraine. That's the reason I'm wearing the blue and yellow with the yellow flowers, because I support the Ukraine and the people there.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Church. And we will go clockwise, so that means Trustee Mayberry.
Thank you very much. I'll keep mine really short. First of all, I do want to pass on my appreciation to all of our colleagues. I don't know if you've noticed, this is it looks like a new outlet, so you don't have to have cubes. Thank you very much. I wanted to point that out. I really appreciate that, the charger.
It was all me.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. But it does help. I had an opportunity to visit Bud Beasley and watch up close and personal professional learning communities segment with a learning facilitator, and really helped me understand just how valuable that process is. And I appreciate the opportunity and watching the teachers interact and sort of dissecting where the problems are, and in certain mathematical equations, working together to develop other ideas and ways to improve the curriculum. So that was a real enlightening opportunity for me. And this week I'll be attending some of the ROTC accreditations, so I'm looking forward to that. So, thank you, Madam Vice President. You did a really nice job today. I appreciate your leadership.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. You guys are swell. All right, Clerk Minetto.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The last 2 weeks have been such a whirlwind, I can't even remember what all I've done. It's been it seems like we did a lot of training and riding hard and fast. But what especially stands out in my mind is when we went to Natchez, Vice President Nicolette and Superintendent Dr. McNeil. We went to Natchez, and oh my goodness, the principal is on fire. The kids are on fire. They all love being there. The staff loves being there. And it was so delightful. And we insisted on bringing our, there can be a test on this later. Okay. Now is it Paiute? Thank you. Paiute, the Paiute language words. I mean, look at be nice. And now from what I'm recalling, this is a very new written language. In the last, the guy who wrote it was still alive. So it's just bringing it back from the tribe. And that's such a wonderful thing. Anyway, it was just a wonderful visit, and I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Trustee Rodriguez.
It's been a busy couple weeks. There's some training in there we all got to be part of. I also got to attend Alice Smith Elementary School, which was, staff there is awesome. The kids are great, and it's a beautiful school. A little bit of a traffic problem there too, kind of a main artery. And I also got to visit Shaw Middle School with a Sparks Council member, so that was really nice, actually building relationships with our other local offices out there and sharing same concerns and obstacles. And Trustee Smith and I also got to speak with our school police chief and HR, some different topics and ideas. So just moving forward on some things that Trustee Smith and I share. And I think that's pretty much it. There's a lot more, but those are the main highlights.
Always more, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Trustee Smith.
I will cover your more because I have photos. JJ, before we start my time, do we have the pictures? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I learned it from Ellen. So the first thing I wanted to say, which is a personal statement, and that I absolutely share Trustee Church's support of the Ukraine for very deep and personal family reasons, and my heart is very much with them. On the board report side, so I participated in the second full day of equity and diversity training, which most of the board had for that second full day. First picture that we have up here, I attended the Associated General Contractors Annual SIR Awards. Principal Mike Nakashima from Swope Middle School was my guest. And in the second photo, we were also there with Trustee Rodriguez. And these partners are phenomenal. When we talk about building new schools and making that happen, it's the people in this room that we were celebrating. As Trustee Rodriguez mentioned, we had 2 dedicated meetings with different members of senior staff around recruiting and retention and ideas around how we can support our officers. I also met with Nicole Willis-Grimes. She's the Executive Director of Communities and Schools. And this is such an incredible organization. They partner with us so much. It's really well timed that we were celebrating our social workers because they really also support that mental health element, particularly with our integrated student support. So very impressed with that. Next set of pictures, I joined Vice President Nicolette at Galena High School. We visited Mr. Adam Shota, and we saw their simulated workplace program, which develops students in 4 areas of professional skills. So that's attendance, technology, professionalism, and reliability, and leadership and teamwork. It was absolutely phenomenal. And a special thank you to Josh Hartzog, who runs the Signature Academy and CTE programs, and the Galena principal, Jay Salter, for helping to make that happen. This is a program that is amazing. And there's a second picture there. I was very excited to be invited by Libby Booth Elementary School, and I read to classrooms for Reading Week. I read the book I Am Brave, which was amazing. I also did a school visit to Echo Lodor Elementary School, so I met with Principal Amy Wright, and I really loved the wraparound support that I saw there. They really focus on the whole child and what it is that they need in order to have an ideal environment to learn and grow. I also toured Smithridge STEM Academy with Principal Mike Dixon, and a huge call out that I learned there is that their grade level teams meet a minimum of 4 times a week to plan and analyze student work. That is phenomenal. And then also finally earlier today, Trustee Rodriguez and I had the real pleasure of touring 2 of our building trades apprenticeship programs. And so these are the programs that our students are beginning their trades careers with. And it's absolutely impressive. I mean, it's a profession, it's extended education. Many of these trades apprentices are graduating with college degrees at the end of these programs. And it was just truly amazing. So great, great stuff. The end.
President Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, and great job running the meeting. Want to make sure I say that. In fine hands. I might miss next time too. No, just kidding. Join most of my colleagues. I'll make this quick. I know it's difficult on Zoom. Join most of my colleagues in diversity and equity training, day 2. So thank you everyone for making the time and the commitment, and some members of the staff as well. And thanks to the staff for conducting that for us. I had an opportunity to read via Zoom to several classes from Hall Elementary School. Read just a great story about dreaming. As towards I think it was the last day or close to the last day of Black History Month, and I was asked to read to them, and I had a great time doing that. Thank you for the invitation, Hall Elementary School, and then answered a bunch of questions from a lot of classes. So we really had a lot of fun. Let's see, the annual Dr. Martin Luther King dinner was on this past Monday because it was rescheduled due to the spike in COVID cases. And I was able to accompany the keynote speaker to Reno High School on a Monday morning, and she spoke to a class that's really just beginning to do more outreach in terms of diversity and inclusion, and just really the race relations as a whole at Reno High School. And so just a shout out to those staff members or counselor there. Let's see, I forgot her role. Anyway, she did a great job. It was her first time putting something like this together. It was open to several different classrooms that brought their kids there, very diverse group. The principal was there, the counselor was there. It was really, really good, really great. Again, it was in honor of Black History Month and just expanding what is some of those community partnerships that we can be involved in as a school with the community. So that happened to be great. The dinner was great that night. We had essay contest winners that won cold hard cash from our district, elementary school and middle school. Winners were sisters, which was great, and they wore their traditional Tongan dress when they read portions of their essay. And then there were 2 high school winners, and then 1 college winner who's also a graduate of school in the Washoe County School District. And let's see, I think that was, then finally, I was able to participate in the inspections for the Hug High School battalion. And, we have 2, it's the largest ROTC program in the state at Hug High School. And so they allow me, when I'm able to attend, and I was there with my colleague, Dr. Nicolette, was there as well. And we got a chance to just go around and do the inspections and just watch the parade. And it was a great day, a great day out there. And then I too want to join my colleagues, specifically Church and Smith, to just lend my thoughts and prayers to the people of Ukraine. I can't tell just how crazy blue and yellow your shirt is, Trustee Church, but I can tell you have a little something going on. But it is worthy of it, just because it's important to show our support for Ukraine. So thank you for doing that, and I know we all join in that. So that's it for me.
Thank you, President Taylor. I will close this out before the last public comment opportunity. I am trying to focus on something a little different. Am I okay? Okay. And that's the history, and I started that our last meeting. So, a little JROTC, it was mentioned several times. They're called the Silver State Brigade. And let me read you their mission statement: to motivate young people to be citizens of character by instilling in them a sense of personal responsibility, accomplishment, and the importance of serving their nation and community. So this is the 30th year of the Silver State Brigade, but JROTC, it's marked by 106 years. So it has a long, strong history. There's 1 Air Force JROTC in Washoe County School District. There's 2 Navy and 8 Army. I had the privilege of attending McQueen accreditation process, and their service learning. It's a very complicated and long process, but just to get to something kind of fun, their service learning project at McQueen, they collected 1,400 pounds of food and donated that to the Nevada Food Pantry. That was really a big relationship building process. HUG, their continuous improvement project, they looked at the attendance of their cadets, and they did some deep dive data, and they had some recommendations. So they really focused on that connection between coming to school and student performance, and it was really wonderful. Just wave to them. Someone you know is on that train. Safe travels. That's kind of fun, actually. I think that building magnifies it. Yeah? Yeah.
Try being in my office when it goes by.
Oh, it's good to laugh, right? Okay, the second and last, and you give me a few more minutes? Okay, here we go. Natchez, they're the Mustangs. They are from the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe. Natchez Winnemucca was the chief. He was the chief and was very famous for being a peaceful chief of the Paiute tribe. Natchez Winnemucca was the brother of Sarah Winnemucca, a school here in Reno, and like his sister, he worked for a better life for his people. He was known to whites as Little Winnemucca. Natchez Winnemucca served as a scout along with his sister Sarah while they were at Camp McDermott. And there you go. I will stop. I could go on because that was a delightful visit. All right. Last portion, public comment. And
I'll do my report.
Oh, sorry. I
That's
guess you
all right.
do have a
Yes,
report, don't
yes.
you? Superintendent McNeil.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Vice President Nicolette. So, Damani Ranch High School, you probably noticed I switched out my sweatshirts. Damani Ranch, we want to give a huge shout out to our Mustangs. They took 4th place nationally for cheer. So we are very, very proud of our Damani Ranch Mustangs. And then I am wearing North Valleys today to celebrate our North Valleys teacher. This is the second North Valleys teacher who was chosen for the NASA Airborne Astronomy Ambassador Program. And we are super proud of Mr. Young. Mr. Conkley had already been in that program, but now Mr. Young gets to go to this fabulous program. And he'll be able to bring back information. The Natchez visit, I want to do a huge shout out to Jake Chapin, our poster. I think it's very meaningful when we talk about inclusive practices. He is doing an outstanding job there with all of the students at Natchez, and it's something I think that our entire world can learn about being helpful, behaving, being respectful, and being nice to one another. I was able to go over to Bennett Elementary, and thank you to Principal Diaz for inviting me over there to do a very special book and reading to 3rd graders, which was fabulous. I attended the Martin Luther King dinner with President Taylor and then also with Trustee Mayberry, shared my table. That was very, very nice, so thank you so much for accompanying me. And then also I wanted to do a huge shout out to Connie Taylor, who was actually inducted into the Martin Luther King Hall of Fame. And then all of our essay winners were, it was great to see them, but I wanted to do a shout out to President Taylor's mom, Connie, for that. And then attended a NAS meeting virtually because they were up in Winnemucca. We got that there, President Taylor. And that is my report, Madam Vice President.
I was going to ask, where's the dog? I couldn't, what? That sounded like a woof, woof, woof. Congratulations, Connie. They're saying goodbye. All right, public comment. Closing item 5.01, public comment. Comments from the public are invited at this time on topics not specifically addressed elsewhere in the agenda. A public comment card should be filled out and submitted to the recording secretary, that would be JJ, before speaking during the public comment section, which must at least include the name of the speaker. Pursuant to Board Policy 9115, meetings of the Board of Trustees, all persons are limited to 3 minutes per item. The time limit may be altered at the discretion of the president, the board chair of the committee. In order to comply with Nevada Revised Statutes, Chapter 241, Open Meeting Law, and on the advice of legal counsel, the board/committee is discouraged from discussing or precluding from deliberating or acting on items raised by public comment which are not already on the agenda. Pursuant to NRS 241.035, the correspondence or written materials submitted for public comment shall be attached to the minutes of the meeting. The Board of Trustees may impose reasonable content-neutral restrictions on public comment, such as willfully disruptive comments that are irrelevant, repetitious, slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational, amounting to personal attacks, or interfering with the rights of other speakers. The board will also accept public comments beforehand via the website. All right, we are now open for public comment. JJ.
Melanie Sutton.
I forgot to put this, if you guys can put this on the screen. This was for last time I spoke. I don't know where I'm supposed to put it. It won't go on the screen. It won't go. Why? We don't have that. I asked permission prior, but okay. If you guys don't have the ability, whatever. Second of all, it really pisses me off. How many of you are affected by what's going on in Ukraine? How many? How many of you? Raise your hands. Because it's affecting me. My son's getting deployed to freaking Poland for the Ukraine. Okay? So you have no business talking about Ukraine unless you actually have a... I'm sorry. It's really hard for me. But yes. The reason why I'm here is to speak on SHARE and what came out as far as what's going on with fourth graders. My daughter, I apologize. My daughter is a fourth grader that I homeschool. And what came out with what you guys want to teach fourth graders is disgusting. It's pornography. What the heck are you guys doing? What are you doing? What are you doing to our children? Mayberry, your seat is not comfortable either. And Rodriguez and Smith and Minetto, none of your guys' seats are comfortable. We're taking them. And we're going to get rid of SHARE because what that is doing is destroying our children. The school has no business teaching pornography in our schools. It's disgusting, and that should be done in the home. Not pornography, but as far as everything else, should be done in the home. Not the schools. The schools should not be teaching this. It's pornography. And if anybody got caught with what is being taught in our schools, they'd be in jail for life. And I apologize for my emotions because the Ukraine thing did bring up something for me because my son is getting deployed to Ukraine. I apologize. That's not true. Getting deployed to Poland, and he's switching to be from Navy to be infantry, Army, and he's going to be in the fight. So I apologize. My emotions got the best of me.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton. I will say that my son served in the Marines for 20 years and served in that Eastern Europe area, and my heart goes out to you and the best of your luck and safety to your son.
Debbie Martin.
Could you please repeat your name?
Yes, Debbie Martin.
Debbie Martin, thank you.
Thank you for
Welcome.
listening. I really want the children to stop being taught CRT, LGBTQ, and stop teaching our children about explicit sex. Stop indoctrinating them. They are innocent. Boys and girls are completely different, and God meant that to be that way, and should be taught in separate classrooms when it comes to bodies and have their own bathrooms because it's a private sort of thing. And it is not okay to call the girls a body with a vulva, nor boys a body with a penis. I don't like the world you are creating for our children. You are distorting their world. And our kids are far behind. They were 49th in the nation. The Washoe County School District must concentrate on academics, not sex. It's CRT and LGBTQ. The children need to have successful lives, and they cannot do it without education. The educating should be reading, writing, math, science, history, English, social studies, civil. United States is wonderful. We like 1776 and history, and they are sponges, and they need to learn while they have their sponges soaking up all this knowledge that could make them wonderful people in the future. So that's my commenting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope Backman.
Good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. So nice to see your faces for the first time. My name's Hope Backman. Thank you for having me here today. I also would like to talk about the SHARE program. You guys sent out an alert letting the parents know that the information was available for viewing, so I went ahead and did that. It's disgusting. So thinking maybe I was just being extra sensitive, I looked up gynecology books. Nothing is like that in any gynecology book. So in our SHARE program, we have an illustration of a cartoon of a little girl laying on her back with her legs open, exposing everything that's in between her legs. And then we get to talk about how sensitive a clitoris is. And I'm thinking, wow, I bet half the people in this room don't even know about how sensitive their clitoris is, but my son needs to know about this at 8 or 9. And then I'm thinking, but he's not even going to know how to spell clitoris because they took spelling out of school. So instead of learning spelling words, he's learning about the sensitivity of a girl's clitoris. And that's disgusting. Then it also goes into talking about dating and romance, all in the, for 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds. That's what we're focusing on. That's what we're dumbing them down to. Sex and romance and broken hearts. So if you watch the videos, and I took screenshots of the videos, but there's blown up condoms for balloons in these videos. Now, how appropriate is blown up condom balloons? And then there's one image in particular that I just can't figure out, and it's of a naked butt with some white stuff coming out of the butt. It's right here. It's in your approved curriculum. What is the white stuff that's flying out of the butt? I don't know what that is. It's clearly white stuff that's flying out of a butt right here. And it's in your SHARE program, but I can't see how that even, what is it? But Dr. Mike Paul can't tell me. Maybe Miss Krista McNeil can tell me. I mean, they both have PhDs, so I'm sure they would know what the white stuff is coming out of the butt. But if I don't know what the white stuff is coming out of this butt that's in your approved videos for my 8-year-old to watch, do you think he's going to know what the white stuff is coming out of this butt here? Or what a clitoris is? I don't know. It's pretty disgusting, guys. Can't we do better than that? I mean, I know we're 51st place. But maybe if we did something a little bit better than normalize pedophilia in school, our performance would go up maybe to at least 41st place. God help us. We'll be here, though. We'll be here to watch you guys until something changes.
Pablo Nava Duran.
Well, I do support SHARE program, but if a parent can opt out, I think they should get opt out. But a SHARE program has been implemented in Washoe County School District a very long time. When I take the SHARE program in 4th grades, so nothing new to me. So the parents are being bashing now, create a fake problem or something like that. And I think that if I got a message for the parent who supports proposed share program. If you don't like a share program, you can opt out. So it is your choice. So your choice to opt out of the program. You don't have, you don't want to, you don't criticize the school district such to opt out of the share program. Yeah, it's to have a sign information about share programs. So I was later, I sent a parents sent later. So I will support share program. Despite the parent who over here backlash. So I have a message for the parent who over here. Another message, no topic. So I know you support Donald Trump in a GOP, kind of something like that. And then I heard the recent news about many of you or some GOP are supporting Putin over America. Think about it. If you support, unless if you stand with Ukraine, you're on the right side of history. That's what we're here. So, poor Putin party, Trump party. Now GOP is poor Putin party. They reject the Reaganism, which is why Reagan are very against Russia or the Soviet Union. That's very shameful of you guys are supporting Putin over America. Over Ukraine and America, over democracy, and then you support authoritarian over democracy. If I saw in Russia, I saw many Russian legislators are passing censorship law, which is ban independent media, and then they have to shut down all the media. Many Russians are against war with Ukraine. And then, against war in Ukraine, they have no right to protest or assembly. They go in jail for 15 years. And many Russians who don't support Putin are think about leaving their country. And then, right now we have a Ukrainian refugee are coming to America, and maybe some Russians are coming to America because of authoritarian Putin that put it on over a people. So that's shame on you.
Thank you, Mr. Duran.
Catherine Snedinger.
For the record, my name is Catherine Snediger. I'm a non-person, non-resident, unenfranchised natural woman. I've lived in Washoe County for 33 years now. The school district has gone downhill so bad, and people get away with stealing from us, from this board. So I want to know what you're doing to get the money back from that woman who sat here for 2 years in the wrong seat. That's my taxpayer money. I want to know how to get it back. And if you're not going to do anything about it, then I guess that leaves it up to us to do something about it. And all of you can be implicated as co-conspirators for her. That means you'll all be part of the lawsuit because you're not trying to get the money back. It's not your money. It's not her money. It's the taxpayer money, and she needs to return it. And for you to sit here and do nothing about it, but you want us to obey all your stupid rules, and you don't obey the statutes at all. How's that work? We pay your salary. We are your bosses. I had my kid in the Washoe County School District. What a joke that was. He didn't show up he was at school every day. Socializing, he never went to class. So they called me, and I went down and I talked to every one of his teachers and his counselor and the vice principal. And I told him if he misses one class, I want to know about it. I don't think that's too much to ask. Well, I get a call about 3 weeks later, and they're telling me from that school, your son hasn't been in class for 2 weeks. Wow. I just told him I don't care. You don't care? I tried to do something. You're not interested? Deal with it. So Washoe County School District And some of these schools are just not up to the job. And to be 51st, meaning Puerto Rico is smarter than us, is pretty sorry. And how you can sit there and smirk like you do, Mr. whatever your name is, Rodriguez, you're part of the problem. And I don't like my taxpayer dollars being wasted on someone who didn't belong here. You gonna let me come and sit up here and make up decisions and do stuff? And get paid for it? And then find out, oh, you shouldn't have been there, and not ask for the money back? What is with that? What is with that?
Mike Krogan. The board received emails from Joe Morabito, a parent of a Damani Ranch and DePoli student, and Will Harper.
All right. That concludes our meeting for today. We are adjourned.